This has probably happened to you every couple months or so. You look up from what you're doing, otherwise occupied feeding the dog or paying your power bill, and you look up and they'll be trying once again to make Roseanne Barr be quiet. Shut up, Roseanne Barr, you're a Nazi. You're crazy. It's not working. Roseanne Barr has been in the public eye for almost 40 years, and amazingly, she's more influential than ever. So we thought we would check in with her and see how she's doing. Roseanne Barr, how are you?
I'm great, Tucker. How are you?
Well, you're obviously unbowed. I can't remember where I was the other day, and someone was like, Roseanne Barr's a Nazi. She's an anti-Semite. I'm thinking, you can probably criticize her. Probably not a Nazi or an anti-Semite.
Probably not.
Probably not. So they famously canceled the resurgence of your show, the relaunch of your show.
Just like you, when it was #1. Hey, how come don't their shareholders wonder why they would do that?
I don't know how that spooky finance stuff works.
I don't either.
I've still got some questions, I will say that. But
did you figure out, like I did, that it's really personal?
Oh, it's always personal.
Yeah.
The thing about television is everything's personal on
Yes,
TV.
it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's about you.
Yeah.
So that's great when everyone's like, oh, you're Jesus. But it's not so good when they're like, you're fired. I don't take any of it personally, thank heaven. But you get fired in this very, very public way, become the center of the national debate over Trump, but you don't go away. And then all of a sudden look up and you're everywhere. How did that happen?
I don't know how it happened. I really don't.
Did you expect to be doing this at this stage of your life?
No. No. Well, I guess when I was really little, I saw myself doing something that was going to have good consequences to it. And so anyways, this week I was like, hey, this is like when you were little and now you're doing it. It was one of those minutes where you go, thank you, God, because I do feel like God puts me where he wants me. I mean, I'll tell you all that later, but
No,
so
tell me
I
what.
go like, hey, I'm a lady citizen journalist for my old age. Hell, that's great. It's great because, I love that. Oh, no, I can't remember her name, but that one that used to interview everybody in the 50s. She had her own show, and she did the greatest interviews. And I'm so stupid, I can't remember her name. Jake, check that lady out. My son.
Lady in the 50s who used to interview people.
She had a great interview show. Anyway, but I like being a citizen journalist. Like you're a real journalist, but you're also a writer, which astounds me because we never see that anywhere. I mean, you are such a great writer.
Well,
so I want to talk to you about that, and I look forward to doing that. But you are such a great writer because I have so much to say. I want to say it like this. Let me think. I'm a deeply religious Jew, which is why they call me a Nazi and an anti-Semite, and a racist.
Yeah, well, of course.
And a transphobe and whatever, a Zionist baby killer. They call me everything. And before that, when I was on the left, the right used to. But they're the same, I guess. It's all the same people.
I've
They're playing
noticed.
different parts. They've called me a cow, a whole, destroying the American dream, man hater. They're always throwing stuff at me, and none of it was ever true. But I had to live through all that gauntlet of hate since I first showed up.
Sorry,
in
we haven't
Hollywood.
answered your question. It's Arlene Francis.
No, not Arlene. She was good, though. Not Barbara Walters. I knew her. She was good, though, with Anwar Sadat, wasn't she? No, she was a kind of an ugly little woman with brown hair.
Okay, so an ugly little woman with brown hair.
Faye Emerson?
No.
Wendy Berry?
No.
Check Google ugly little woman with brown hair, 1950s.
The greatest interview. Mae Brussels. Thank you, God.
Mae Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
Was this on Salt Lake City stations?
Yeah, my dad used to watch it.
Okay.
And he'd say, this woman has integrity. My dad used to decode media for me.
Yes.
Because he wanted to be a comedian. So he always showed me how comedy works and, anyway. Oh my God, I can't even focus my mind. But anyway.
So you said you're a deeply religious Jew.
Yeah, and since I was 3 years old, I wrote it in my third book called Roseanarchy. I've had a conversation going with God. I wrote it in my book. You know how little kids have an imaginary friend?
Yes.
Well, mine was God. It's kind of
You
weird.
chose wisely.
Yeah, because that's all we studied. It was an Orthodox Jewish family. And so that was my friend. And I talked to him when I would read and study. I wanted to know everything about it, and I would talk to him. And he'd always answer this in my book. I said, how come you could solve every problem on earth? All you got to do is just wiggle your little finger and you could stop all these problems. Why can't you do that? All you have to do is wiggle your finger. Because I was a suffering child.
Yes.
And he said to me, because I don't have fingers, Roseanne, but you do. And he said, and you should be very proud of that opposable thumb that I put on that hand of yours, because now you can really get busy helping a lot of people and trying to make things right. And he always gave me the answer that I knew God would give me. He didn't ever go, yeah, go get them. Yeah, they're wrong in their religion. He didn't never say none of that. So I knew it was him, So he told me all the time, go over here and do this and go over there and do that. And just trust me on this. And I did that my whole life, with the exception of a few marriages that really effed me up. But then I got rid of those guys and continued on the path I was supposed to go on.
Did you not ask for guidance on the marriages?
I didn't listen.
Yeah.
It wasn't God's fault. Yeah,
Right.
he told me, but I go, I'm putting you on hold.
Yeah.
I got some physical business that you don't want to know about.
Do you think he knew?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't anything. I was married, so it wasn't anything bad.
Right.
I mean, except for that it was horrible sex, which, people should not have sex. That's one way that we can fix the world right now.
Does people stop having sex?
Yes, absolutely.
That's a tough one. It's harder
I
than
know.
like quitting smoking or something.
I know. Unless you're married and you can take care of the kids that are going to be a result of it.
Yes.
Right? Isn't that common sense?
I strongly agree.
That's why I tell these young women, don't worry about them overthrowing Roe v. Wade. For one, I tell to my nieces that are all liberals, you don't have to worry about that. You rushed out to get the vax, so you're never going to get pregnant. You ain't going to have no baby. Don't even worry about it. Right?
What? You must be their favorite aunt.
Yeah.
You're sterile. Don't worry.
Yeah.
How do they respond?
They get really mad. They never laugh. That's the thing about fascists that I found in my life. Fascists, they don't like laughter,
No.
and they don't like discussion.
Yes.
Them are the two things they hate the most. And they might be on the right and they might be on the left. But if they can't laugh at themselves or anything, and they can't discuss civilly with someone that they disagree with, they got to go. They got to move aside, because it's a whole new world now, because we got citizen journalists.
Yes.
And we have journalists such as yourself with a conscience who care about this country and what it means and how we have to do everything we can to save it at
Yes.
this late date.
Late date.
For all of us, hello,
Yes.
and stop buying in the bullshit. I said that to introduce the POTUS, the deep state bullshit.
Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned that. We have that clip.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Roseanne Barr, this is your life. Here you are.
Aren't we all fed up with the deep state bullshit? And the bullshit. We want Trump, the Magador, to kill that goddamn bull! And the bullshit, kill that goddamn bull!
Okay. Now, Well, I was putting the political analysis on hold for 2 seconds. You're obviously enjoying that immensely.
Oh, it was so fun. It was so awesome. It's always fun to make people laugh and, come alive.
So I think even if like you didn't like Trump and you weren't going to vote for Trump, you look at that and be like, that looks like a pretty good time.
Oh, no, I wouldn't do it if I...
Oh, of course. I don't mean you, but like, how can anyone watch that? You're wearing a cowboy hat.
Yeah, I
screaming
swiped it
obscenities.
off a guy.
You did?
And they didn't have the mic, so I had to stand on my tiptoes, which, I could barely reach the mic. But, I swiped this hat off a guy. And, I didn't like how my hair looked. Don't you like how my hair... I cut my own hair with toenail clippers. It took me 4 days. But I cut it hair by hair because I was so sick of it. But yeah,
In the
I
mirror?
had a... Yeah, of course in the mirror. I'm not crazy.
Did anyone see you do it?
No.
Good.
I was in a room by myself. But no, but I loved it, and I had spent a lovely week down there at Mar-a-Lago. It was so awesome, and I just loved it.
What do you think of Trump the guy? You know him, obviously. What do you think of him?
Well, as I always say, he's the only guy in my Hollywood career that ever returned a favor. He's the only one who ever returned a favor and gave me back more than I had given him. I think he has such integrity. I think he's like me a lot. He says he tries to be funny, and he is really funny.
Yeah,
the guy's really funny. He's got great timing, and I laugh.
So you've known him
we
a
all
long time.
laugh. I mean, we all think he's funny.
What favor did he return?
Well, I did. I was doing I think it was my second or third HBO special, stand-up special, and I always wait till the last minute. So anyway.
What, to write it?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. It's bad because I can't unless I'm in a panic. I can't write.
Well, I know what you mean.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes.
Unless all that chemical panic
Yeah.
it kicks in, my brain doesn't function well.
Yeah.
Unless
you're running from a bear, you don't run fast.
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah.
it. Hello. Oh, that reminds me of the best joke my dad told me, but I'll save that. But I'll tell you after about the running from a bear. What are we talking about?
Tell me about when you first met Trump. You're doing your HBO special.
Oh, no, that isn't when I first met him, but he let me film it at Trump, New Jersey. What's that called? Atlantic City.
Atlantic City, yeah.
And not only that, but he drove me out in his Packard on stage. He drove me out in his Packard, got out and escorted me to the microphone, which was so lovely because my second special, I did it as a has-been who's coming back.
Yes.
And oh my God, did they hate that? I got sued by every single casino in the world and I had to give them back all the money. Because it was when I got really famous after my first HBO special. And so my second one, I thought it would be really funny to come back and be a failed diva, kind of like really prophetic, like it is now, and go, when I went to rehab, I say I was injured. I was thrown off a horse while making National Velvet, and my doctor prescribed crack, and I had all this stuff. But then I went to rehab. I didn't really want to go, but my publicist said it would help my comeback, and it was that kind of thing. And then, like, I watched Barbra Streisand's One Voice. She did this concert in her backyard where she charged all of Hollywood something like $10,000 to come in her backyard and watch her. And I did her act word for word because it was the greatest thing any entertainer's ever done. I never thought I'd ever sing in public again. But then again, no, she goes like this. I could never imagine myself singing in public again. But then, again, I could never imagine the possibility of nuclear winter. She actually said that. And so I did it, word
But
for
she
word.
wasn't kidding.
No, she wasn't kidding.
Do you know
Not
her?
kidding. A little bit. She's deeply serious about what she says. She's just just been in a bubble for far too long.
Yes.
She needs to go. I never was in a bubble, like I say, even though I was very much in a bubble in my own family. I lived in Salt Lake City, Utah. We were Jews in Salt Lake, so my joke. We stuck out like a sore thumb in that town because we only had the one mother. So that, but
Wait, but,
But-
your family, as I remember, you were Jews in Salt Lake City,
Mhm.
Jews in a Mormon state
Mhm.
selling Catholic religious icons or
yeah,
something like that?
mhm, yeah, yeah. My dad and grandpa, they sold pictures, 3D pictures of Jesus to the our Mexican neighbors, and they'd get $2 on welfare payday. We had to go knock on the door and get the $2 on welfare payday. We were on welfare too, but so it was handy to live in the neighborhood where you were selling the pictures. But they were like this. I was a little girl, and it was Jesus like this with his arms out, so nice and blonde and everything. And then when you took 2 steps, he's crucified. And I used to go through that room like, oh, it added to my PTSD.
Oh, did they keep the
Yeah,
pictures in
they
the
was all-
house?
Yeah, because we only had like 2 rooms. So they stacked around the, walls there.
It's
just
not your
scary.
average childhood.
It's not your average childhood. I was always a stranger in a strange land, but it gave me a unique perspective, and God gave me a unique perspective. Like he was talking to me today, he's like, Roseanne, have you noticed what a gift I've given you by putting you in your lifetime to be alive in a world where the jokes just write themselves? And I go, I'm grateful. Thank you. Because they do.
Oh, yeah.
It's just
never been
perfect
easier
for
to write
me.
comedy.
It's just perfect.
So
and
you're
because
enjoying
like
it? Like
you-
things are collapsing, but you're enjoying it.
But like you, like Virginia Woolf said, the job of the writer is to put the severed parts together,
Yes.
to create the clear picture for the viewer or the reader. That's what you do too. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. How fun is it to put those parts together? And those 2 wires have never gone together, never been allowed to go together. And they just start a friggin' huge, one spark sets the whole woods on fire, We're seeing it. We're seeing people go, wow, I've been lied to my whole life every day.
So what about the people that you worked with for so many years in the entertainment business? Are any of them coming to these conclusions?
No, I don't think so. But, once you're in that bubble, the bubble of show business or whatever bubble it is, your little secret society or club, you don't never come out of it. You got to walk out like Egypt, like the Jews in Egypt.
Yeah.
If you're not going to leave Egypt, you're never going to know what's beyond it, And 2/3 of the Jews, the Israelites, tribes, they didn't want to leave slavery. They had to be forced to leave slavery.
Yes.
So that's how it is. So people that are like able to still laugh and think and put severed parts together and get a clear picture are very needed now. And, I'm praying that it will expand ever more so with the things that are coming out in the news. But they do try to hide the news on the news. The news is to hide the news,
I've noticed.
Yeah, so this whole...
The sin is to tell the truth.
Yeah, that's what you're punished for. In a world of lies, the truth is seen as, I can't remember how that thing goes. The truth is seen as
The
something
truth is the only
nasty.
crime.
Yeah, that's...
So you've been on the road with Trump. You were at that rally in Florida. Where do you see that going for him? Do you think he's going to win?
I don't know. It seems, of course, I want that to happen. But then when you get on Twitter or any of those social media things, where everybody just paid to lie.
Yeah.
And, I saw it happening on Facebook a million years ago. I saw all of this my whole life. I was raised in an apartment house with survivors from Auschwitz. And I always knew it would come here because it always goes everywhere. And it's a virus. And, I see people in the streets repeating Nazi slogans that they don't even know come from the Nazis. Yeah, I've seen it my whole life. And I do think Trump is the anti-Hitler, even though Hillary says he's the Hitler. But, I mean, that one is amazing, isn't it? How they use the reversal and the mirror image.
Yes.
As they lock up, as they use the judicial system to persecute their opponent legally, and they make up these fake attorney general lawsuits that don't even have a victim, like Letitia James,
Yes.
who's seen as a civil rights worker or something, abuse the law to that point and allow no jury. I mean, it's just so terrifying to me as a Jewish American. And that's allowed, and that the press honks it up. You know, if they just honk it up, crank it up, we got to keep this going. We got a lot of people to divide and get hating on each other, which is why I came back to television. I didn't want them to do this because I know where it leads. What starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. The Jews are just the convenient canary in the coal mine, you know, because you know, a lot of people don't like us, and you know, there's a lot of reasons they don't. When you got names like Epstein, Weinstein, Blinken, people that are like, you know, yelling, people that are like on the side of against the American taxpayer, for God's sake, Soros, Kissinger. I can name a ton of them. And like I say in my act, just because a very sizable portion of our people are horrible fucking people, please don't hold us all to that. But you know, it's embarrassing. And then they're the ones calling me an anti-Semite. But they didn't stick up for me when I said the Iran deal was an existential threat to Israel in so many words in the captioning of a meme during a 3-month conversation about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Iran, and the United States. Nobody Jewish stuck up for me because I'm a Nazi, because I like Trump. And why do I like Trump? Because Trump understands the Jewish people, and we owe a deep debt of gratitude to him for that. And that is why myself and my mother, who's a lifelong Democrat, unbelievably also loves Trump.
Really?
That's a minor miracle right there, buddy. Yeah, because she finally saw what the Iran deal is really about. And so she can't vote Democrat ever again at age 90.
What is, pardon my ignorance, I mean, I watched this happen. I knew some of the people involved in it, but I never really understood what the Iran deal is about.
Well, it's about what just happened in Israel on October 7th. That's what it's about, in shorthand. They unleashed remember in the movie Planet of the Apes?
Yes?
Where they went after all the human beings who could read. They didn't even think they could talk, but they feared they might be able to talk. So all those militarized beings, like in Star Wars, came and beat down and locked those people in cages, the human beings, in the movie Planet of the Apes, which was written by Rod Serling and was actually a movie about Nazi Germany and the Jews. So that was the reference I used in my tweet. But, you know, you kind of have to have a sort of a certain historical vantage point to understand that I was saying that, which they lack in Hollywood.
Yes.
Because all they are is, we want a woman. We want a woman. We want this skin tone, because they're fetishists. Care nothing for our republic, our way of life, our constitutional republic, which people have laid their lives down for decades. I've seen it for 7 decades. People have laid their lives down for that. And then they go about talking what's American, and it makes me sick when they say save our democracy. Well, democracy isn't burning down cities, okay?
No.
Democracy, and forget that word because that means mob rule, but the heart of America, we keep being denied to see the real Americans, the heroes of America. And I see them though, because everywhere I go, I see them. Those are the people that those nurses say, those nurses and doctors that, you know, refused to go along. Those brave people in our armed forces who were kicked out because they understood that no government, least of all this one, has the right to force untested drugs on a captive population, because that's nothing but fascism and Hitlerism and Nazism and Stalinism all mixed together. Because, you know, this is exactly what Hitler would be like if he had computers. That's what we're living in. Yeah. And now we got artificial intelligence where they're going to recreate people's lives using artificial intelligence for their movies. So nobody's even going to have a right to their own life story. They'll steal everybody's life story. It's so horrible. And it's like, I feel like it's 99% sewed up, you know. I don't know if this is the end of the world. It looks like it to me.
Have you asked God about that?
Well, like I told my son, I don't really give a damn because I'll die my way out of it. But y'all will have to deal with it. But here's the good news, that this is what I want to say, and I know you care. In the Torah, it says that the 99% of this world is just physical. And it's that 1% that matters. So I think that 1% is the one they can't factor in because they don't know what it is. They don't got it. But we do. And that's the 1% that is where all wars are decided and won and lost. That's God. So I just invite people to pray with me and pray themselves in their own words, not by rote, not by prayers they've already heard, but in their own words, that we, because I know we do have the power of spirit together to make this all stop and change it. I know we can do it. I just wish other people would know that too. I did it in my life from a real low point. Gave myself permission to believe. I guess that's it. Gave myself permission to connect and believe and walk in, to do what I believe, to walk in my, I don't know what you call it, just to live what I say I believe, to actually believe it and then live it. It's pretty amazing and it's transformative.
How do you feel different now that you've done that?
Well, I first did it in 1999 because I saw this all coming, you know, because I always, everyone says I'm, you know, they got all these mental illness things for it. But really, I just found a safe place inside myself that was connected to God at a young age. You know, it's a relationship. I don't know what you call it. But I just like have been walking deeply with my God for a long, long time. And, you know, I gave myself. Like, well, you know, she don't matter. I just want to be all in for America. I want to be all in for the United States of America because this is where my family would have died if they didn't get here. And I saw that my whole life as a child. They would be dead, and I never would have been born if they didn't have an America. I want it to be here for ever.
I do too.
I know you do.
I do. You spend a lot of time in Hawaii?
I haven't been back in a year since I went on that Fox deal. You know, I was doing that Fox deal. That was January 6th, a couple of years back when I was going to come do that special.
Yeah.
So I moved to Texas December 5th and started working on my act. Talk about waiting till the last minute. But I haven't been back in Hawaii since then.
So, what? I mean, you haven't been there since the fires.
No, they happened on another island.
Yeah, not the one you live on.
Yeah, they happened in Lahaina town.
What
Maui.
was that?
Oh my God! Honestly, I feel that they target. I feel they target certain populations. They don't like anybody that has a direct connection to their sacred ground. I think it has a lot to do with October 7th also. They don't like the people to live above their sacred ground and their sacred ancestors either. Because, you know, they might be able to put up a hotel there for crying out loud. And people, they're nothing but useless eaters. And, you know, they're a bunch of Bible clingers and gun toters and despicables or deportables, whatever she called it.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're just in the way. And then they bring out Oprah. You get $700 and you get $700 and you get $700. You know, it's just part of it. And
Is that
nothing has been done for them.
Is that a criticism of Oprah? Because I don't know that we're allowed to do that.
No, it's not. I'm just, yeah, it is, because it was just, oh my God. Yeah, it was an attack on the Hawaiian people, and that's something that's very meaningful to me too. When I went to Hawaii, I won't even go into that. But yeah, they haven't done nothing. They're moving a lot of those people from Lahaina over to my island now, over Big Island. They're putting them in Hilo. That's a war crime, in my opinion. But they're after every tribal people, if you notice, that have oil under them, or a place where they can put a 15-minute smart city, or, you know, a place where they can have a pipeline. They don't like people that are connected to the earth.
I've noticed.
By ancestry. That's all a bunch of crap they read in their old books that say we aren't supposed to be able to have sex with kids. In short.
In short. Last question. Do you see? That's maybe the greatest summary I've heard in a long time.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you hear my other one? I said it to Dinesh D'Souza. Obamaoism.
Obamaoism. I like that.
Thank
You think Obama's behind all this?
Of course. Duh.
Yeah, dumb
he
question.
said it himself. All I need is old sock puppet upstairs so I can sit down here in the basement and do what I do best, dropping bombs on people and droning them and, you know, getting richer. He's the richest president we've ever had. People don't even know that. They don't know Lolo Soetoro co-founded Halliburton with the Bush family. Did you know that?
No.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, what else did you want to ask me? You were going to ask
I
me
don't know.
No, it's true.
I guess I'll end with this. Tell us the bear joke from your father.
Oh, let's see if I can remember it correctly. This guy's telling a guy. I was in the woods the other day hunting, and a bear come at me, and he started chasing me, and I was running, and I run up a tree to get away from him. By God, the bear comes up after me, so I have to jump out of the tree and run, and I see a little creek there. So I run across the creek because I think he'll lose my scent, in the water. But hell no, he comes across the water. He's up there, and he's got me up against a barrel of hay there, and I just shit my pants. And the guy goes, well, I would have shit my pants too if a bear was on me like that. And the guy goes, oh, no, not then, just now. I shit my pants.
Your father told you that?
Yeah.
How old were you when he told you that?
8. That's one of his good ones.
Do you ever have
I
any
told
home
you-
movies from...
Oh, I got so many home movies. When I said, Daddy, how come Santa Claus don't come to our house like he does all the neighbor kids when I was just little? Because Santa Claus hates the Jews. So I couldn't be no other way than this, you know.
Roseanne, it's wonderful to see you.
It's so wonderful to
And
see
I know probably next week or the week after they're going to try and shut you down again, but I don't think it's going to work.
Well, I'm just all about God now and preaching the gospel from the Torah, and I'm going to tell everybody if they don't start repenting, they're going straight to hell. That's what I feel like I was born to do. You know how Trump says he's been preparing his whole life for this fight, so have I. I feel that about myself.
I think you may be onto something there.
People, they need to look inside and straighten up their own life and stop blaming Jews and anybody else. That's my message.
And the old books tell you can't touch kids.
Yeah, and the old books also tell us that, I'm serious when I say this, that God has damned on this earth anyone that is involved in any way that purposely hurts children. Yes. God has damned them all, and it's time to say it.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson's Happy Monday. All of a sudden, it seems like Joe Biden is shooting an awful lot of things out of the sky. Have you noticed? It's not your imagination. Last Sunday, of course, the Pentagon took out that enormous Chinese spy balloon after it had already surveilled our entire country from the Aleutian Islands to South Carolina. You thought the trend was over, but no. On Friday, the White House announced that fighter jets had downed an object the size of a car over Alaska. Then on Saturday, an American F-22 shot down another unidentified object over Canada. Then on Sunday, an F-16 took out what the pilot said looked like a flying octagon 20,000 feet over Lake Huron. This apparently was the same object that the Pentagon had dismissed as a radar anomaly the night before as it hovered over Montana. Montana Congressman Matt Rosendale was not convinced. He said it looked very real to him, and apparently he was right. But what was it? What exactly were all three of these objects? As of yesterday, nobody seemed to know. Listen to the commander of NORAD, Air Force General Glenn Van Herk, pointedly say that the U.S. government has not ruled out the possibility of extraterrestrials.
Because you still haven't been able to tell us what these things are that we are shooting out of the sky, that raises the question, have you ruled out aliens or extraterrestrials? And if so, why? Because that is what everyone is asking us right now.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Helene. I'll let the intel community and the counterintelligence community figure that out. I haven't ruled out anything at this point. We continue to assess every threat or potential threat unknown that approaches North America with an attempt to identify it.
Could be aliens. So here you have three unknown objects in 3 days. If these things are extraterrestrial, what we're seeing is an alien invasion. And that means at some point they're probably going to demand to be taken to our leader. And what are we going to say then? This is Kamala Harris. She once dated Montel Williams, but now she runs our country because her boss is senile? Ooh, pretty embarrassing. Thankfully, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Privately, the U.S. government does not believe these things came from another planet. Whatever they are, they were floating, carried along by wind currents. That means they're lighter than air and therefore unable to enter our atmosphere without burning up. They must have come from Earth. In other words, they're what we Earthlings call balloons. Balloons. Heard the word before? What's weird is that no one in charge is willing to say the B word out loud. Watch Flack John Kirby refuse to describe the flying octagon over Michigan.
Can you tell us anything more about this octagonal object? How big was it?
We're still trying to assess what that was. I'm not going to get into a description. I've seen the press reports about what it looked like. I think we all need to be humble here in terms of what our ability is to positively identify stuff from fighter aircraft that are going several hundred miles an hour past, essentially, in terms of relative motion, a stationary object that was not very big. So we don't know what this exactly looked like, and again, we're still not sure exactly what the purpose of it was or who owned it.
Well, he's got a necktie on and he's standing in front of a podium, but is this normal? Is this the way things are supposed to work? We shot these things down, but we have no idea what they were. We don't know where they came from or what they were doing here. That's what he's saying. That's what they're all saying. And maybe that's true. On the other hand, this is the same administration that sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline, the single biggest act of industrial terrorism in history, and continues to lie about it. So on the other hand, maybe it's not true. NORAD says the U.S. has just readjusted its radar filter, so all of a sudden we're seeing all these objects in the sky we didn't know were there, flying at altitudes that pose an obvious threat to commercial airliners. Okay. And you should take that seriously, especially because it's just been reported, we cannot confirm this, but you've got to wonder, that at least one of these objects was a National Weather Service balloon. Again, unconfirmed, but if that's true, it would mean the Biden administration used fighter jets to shoot down its own balloon, and we really are becoming Fetterman Nation. Let's hope that's not true. We're starting to suspect it might be. Either way, what we know for certain tonight is that there is chaos in America's domestic airspace. That has never happened before. It's not a good sign. There's chaos on the ground, too, a lot of it. 10 days ago, for example, a train derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. That's about 50 minutes outside Pittsburgh. Apparently, there was some kind of mechanical failure. We still don't have details on what that failure was. Of course we don't. We do know about 50 cars derailed. At least 10 of them were carrying thousands of gallons of highly dangerous chemicals, including vinyl chloride, which causes cancer. Watch.
It started with a thunderous boom, then a huge plume of thick black smoke that could be seen for miles. This was the moment officials in East Palestine, Ohio had been planning for, a controlled release of toxic chemicals from several train cars at the site of a derailment, one that has forced thousands from their homes.
And all the way around, everybody's frustrated and like to go home.
The decision to conduct a controlled release came just days after the train derailed in the rural Ohio community, sparking a massive fire. As the blaze continued to burn through the weekend, concerns quickly escalated. That's because 5 of the train cars carried the chemical vinyl chloride, an unstable material with the potential to explode, shooting deadly shrapnel up to a mile away and releasing toxic fumes into the air.
We don't want to second guess anybody. We got to assume everybody involved was doing their best under a highly stressful situation. But did you see that mushroom cloud? That was caused on purpose. And maybe there's a good reason. Again, no second guessing. But what it means is those clouds of toxic smoke flew up and out. And that toxic smoke almost immediately began killing animals. Dead fish washed up on shore. As one hazardous materials specialist put it, we basically nuked a town with chemicals. So then representatives from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, arrived to restore calm. Yes, an EPA spokesman explained, chemicals from the derailed train did enter the local watershed, and yes, they did kill fish. But the drinking water supply remains totally safe. The fish are dead, but go ahead and fill your thermos and brew some coffee. Everything's fine. Now, we don't know if the locals in East Palestine are drinking the water tonight, but we can tell you the Biden administration doesn't seem too concerned about it either way. Donald Trump got over 71% of the vote in the county in the last presidential election. That's not exactly the Democratic Party's core demographic. Fentanyl, toxic waste spill, whatever. They're not our voters. And by the way, what does a chemical spill have to do with climate change? If you can't use it to sell solar panels, it's not really an environmental disaster. That's the rule in Washington. So no one in the Biden administration bothered to issue warnings to communities that might be in the path of those toxic mushroom clouds you saw floating up from the train wreck, because no one cared enough to do that. Pete Buttigieg is the official who's supposed to be in charge of our transportation infrastructure. Technically, he's the transportation secretary. At an appearance today, he seemed to have no idea that there was a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. His real concern, he explained, is that we have too many damn white construction workers in this country.
We have heard way too many stories from generations past of infrastructure where you got a neighborhood, often a neighborhood of color, that finally sees the project come to them, but everyone in the hard hats on that project looking like, doing the good paying jobs, don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's the problem, Mayor Pete. Too many white guys in hard hats. Why didn't we realize this before we built all this infrastructure that's now crumbling? It's actually not funny, and future historians will marvel at just how much damage one incompetent narcissist can cause when he's elevated to a serious job, like transportation secretary. Here's a guy who could not, on a bet, who could not at gunpoint change his own tire, who oversees our roads, railways, and airports, all of which are crumbling from mismanagement and neglect. And not just from mismanagement and neglect, but also from actual acts of sabotage. Over the last 2 years, the FBI has investigated more than 40 cases of rail sabotage in Washington state alone, in one state. Now, a lot of those attacks involve so-called shunt devices. Those are wires stretched between tracks that interfere with the train's electrical signals and cause derailments. In one incident, just before Christmas in 2020, a shunt caused a train to derail in Custer, Washington. That train spilled 30,000 gallons of crude oil and forced locals to evacuate their homes. Well, that's not the environmental disaster that Joe Biden talks about, because, of course, he can't buy solar panels from the Chinese to fix it. But it was, objectively speaking, an act of terrorism. The interesting thing is, very often, in fact, in the majority of cases, people who commit acts of terrorism against infrastructure, whoever they are never punished. And the ones who are caught aren't really punished. One woman who tried to destroy trains using a shunt got out of jail after only a year. Oh. So no one's paying any attention and no one really seems to care, because what does that have to do with environmental racism and climate? And possibly as a result of that attitude, there are an awful lot of train derailments in this country, many more than you may realize. In the last calendar year, more than 1,000 trains went off the tracks in the United States. Oh, how's that for a metaphor? Just today, 2 more trains derailed. One of them was in South Carolina and one was in Texas near Houston. The train near Houston was also carrying hazardous materials, as so many trains are. What's going on here exactly? We're not even going to guess. But we can tell you the chaos is not limited to our rail system. There have also been many recent attacks on our power grid. Very few of those attacks have been widely reported. Last year, there were more than 100 attacks of them in the United States, attacks on our power grid. In North Carolina this winter, for example, nearly 50,000 people lost their power in freezing temperatures when somebody shot up 2 energy substations. And so on. Why is it not a big story? Oh, it's not a story at all. And of course, at the same time, we've also seen a series of bizarre accidents befalling the food industry, threatening our food supply. That would include unexplained fires and plane crashes in processing plants, to chicken feed that seems to stop egg production. Boy, next they'll be coming for the water. Oh, wait, they are. Less than a month into the Biden administration was also a highly sophisticated attack on the water supply outside Tampa.
Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Galtieri says a water treatment plant operator first noticed the remote access hack. The bad actor increased the amount of sodium hydroxide, or lye, in the water supply from 100 parts per million to more than 11,000. For the 15,000 residents of Oldsmar, Florida, the increase of sodium hydroxide in the water supply could have caused vomiting, chest, and abdominal pain.
This type of activity and this type of hacking of critical infrastructure is not necessarily limited to just water supply systems. It can be anything.
Oh, an attack on our water supply. That's weird. I didn't read that in the New York Times. But what's interesting, not to connect the dots or anything, that was not the only attack on our water supply that year. In January 2021, there was a similar effort to poison the water treatment plant that serves the San Francisco Bay Area. An unidentified hacker accessed the facility's computers remotely. According to NBC, quote, after logging in, the hacker deleted programs that the water plant used to treat drinking water. Now, fortunately, in this case, somebody noticed it. The next day, the attack was discovered and those programs were reinstalled, so nobody got poisoned. But they kept trying. There were similar hacks of water treatment facilities in California in August of 2021. There was one in Maine in July of 2021. There was one in Pennsylvania in May of 2021. In Nevada in March. In New Jersey in September of 2020. In Kansas in March of 2019. And so on. So who's looking after our water supply? Water, that's kind of basic. Well, that's the job of the EPA. But what does protecting the water have to do with passing out cash in the name of remediating environmental racism? Oh, nothing! So they're not paying attention. In fact, they're not paying attention to such an extent that even the Washington Post, which is a shill for the administration if there ever was one, pointed out that, quote, for more than 2 decades, the EPA has not been resourced or organized to secure the nation's water and wastewater sector against physical and cyber threats. Wait a second. So nobody's paying attention to the most critical infrastructure, not the racist roads, but food, water, energy, transportation infrastructure, food, water, energy infrastructure. What does that add up to? Oh, that adds up to a country. You can't have a country without those things. And in every single case, whatever the cause, our food, water, energy, and infrastructure are being degraded. Who knows why? If you didn't know anybody, you think there might be a war going on. Why is no one talking about this? J.D. Vance is a senator in the U.S. Senate. He represents the state of Ohio. We're happy to have him join us tonight. Senator, thank you so much for coming on tonight. The tragedy in Palestine, in your state, kind of points up that something is kind of wrong with the fundamentals. I mean, if there are hundreds of train derailments, like, who's paying attention to this stuff and trying to prevent it?
Well, Tucker, we've had hundreds of train derailments after we spent over $1 trillion on infrastructure in this country. So the fact that this isn't getting obviously better is a major indictment of the people spending the money and what they're spending the money on. Now, we know, if you listen to Secretary Buttigieg today, that they are focused more on whether we have too many white men in construction jobs than he is on the fundamentals of his job, which is ensuring we have a viable transportation infrastructure in this country. And unfortunately, my constituents in East Palestine have been some of the main victims of the fact that we have failing infrastructure in our country, again, after spending tons of money in an effort to actually fix it. So the problem we have, Tucker, is that we are ruled by unserious people who are worried about fake problems instead of the real fact that our country is falling apart in some of the most important ways. You mentioned the Environmental Protection Agency. Of course, it says it right there. It should be focused on clean air, clean water. It's the thing that I'm most focused on for the people of East Palestine, but so often they're focused on environmental racism and other ridiculous things instead of fixing the problem that they are established to fix.
You got elected to the Senate in part because you said, look, the people that I grew up with, in your case, literally that you grew up with and are related to, are dying of drugs, and no one in Washington seems to care. This seems a corollary to that. They talk a lot about the environment and environmental racism, but this seems like an actual environmental disaster. I don't detect any urgency from the EPA or from Washington at all. Is it because these are not their voters?
I think that's a big part of it. I think that the entire country, the media complex, the leaders of this country have decided to disregard the people of East Palestine. If you look at the way that this story has been covered, if it's been covered at all, it's about how, you know, there are poor people in East Palestine who have been victimized by this disaster. Well, of course that's true, but you want journalists asking tough questions about what's going on. You want to know, for example, what level of vinyl chloride is actually acceptable in the water. I've been trying to get an answer to that question for days. I haven't been able to get an answer to it. Why is vinyl chloride showing up in the Ohio River in West Virginia and Cincinnati, hundreds of miles away from where this accident took place? There are a lot of questions, and we don't, unfortunately, have a media that's actually interested in asking those questions and answering them.
It's just crazy. All these people are like defacing paintings because they care about the earth. If you care about the earth, clean air and water is the first step. I mean, it's like... Anyway, I appreciate... if you can't get an answer as a sitting U.S. Senator from the state affected, that just tells you everything right there. Thank you, Senator.
We're working it, Tucker. Thank you.
Amen. So nobody will say what these flying objects we keep shooting down are. We think it's worth pressing a little bit on that question. You shoot something down, like, you should know what it is and where did it come from, how did it get over our country. Our next guest has some idea. We'll be right back. There's a puzzling level of secrecy around these objects that the Pentagon keeps shooting down. They tell us they shot them down. They'll tell us all about how they shot them down, but they'll tell us nothing about the objects. We know they have footage of the objects, but of course they're not releasing any of it. What is this? Well, it's certainly not the first time it's happened. Nearly 20 years ago, fighter pilots captured images of the now famous Tic Tac UFO off the coast of Southern California. Chad Underwood is a former Navy pilot. His plane is the one that took those pictures. That's footage that the Pentagon hid for decades. So he has a master's degree in this kind of thing, and we're very happy to have him join us tonight. Chad Underwood, thank you so much for coming on. So,
good to be
given your familiarity with scenarios like this, what do you think is going on here?
Not quite sure. The differences that I've noticed in for 2004 versus present day is the erratic nature of which these objects were flying. In 2004, they were much more erratic, as you've documented, and today it seemed a little bit more predictable. And what surprises me is the rules of engagement are literally being rewritten in front of us. And we have, as a tactical aviator, we have rules that we have to follow in order to get authority to shoot an aircraft down. Yes. And now it's coming from a commander-in-chief level of the United States, Canada, etc., which is kind of the trump card, if you will, and it's a get-out-of-jail-free card for the pilots, that's for sure. But it's just very different.
It is. Really quickly, if you could elaborate on that for those of us who've never been fighter pilots, it's unusual to get the order from the commander-in-chief or the Canadian Prime Minister to go ahead and shoot something down. That pilots don't typically get that.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Normally we operate autonomously, and we go and identify an aircraft, and then we either shoot it down or we don't. And if it's a presidential order that saying you shall shoot down this aircraft, then it changes the game entirely. And we're literally watching those rules of engagement being changed. Not really changed, but altered in every way from both sides. And it's a kind of a dangerous place to be, because it's this has been an interesting couple of weeks, and we'll see what happens from here.
Yeah, I have the feeling, as in your case 19 years ago, we're going to learn that the administration has shot down, by our count, there may be others, but we know of 4 objects shot down over this country in the past 8 or 9 days. One of them we know for sure was from China, and it had some kind of surveillance equipment. Today, White House flack John Kirby didn't seem worried about it, however. Watch.
The first one was Chinese. They admitted it. They claimed it was a weather balloon. We know it's not. These 3, we don't have attribution for right now. We don't know who owns them. So I'm not going to take anybody's word at face value here until we can get a chance to take a look at them. Are we in touch with the Chinese? We have an embassy in Beijing. We maintain routine diplomatic conversations, and we have had over that spy balloon incident, we did have private discussions with senior Chinese leaders. Unfortunately, the Chinese military is not interested in talking to Secretary of Defense Austin, but there are still ways to communicate. And the president would tell you that now's exactly the time to at least preserve some of those lines of communication so that we can avoid miscalculation.
So what is going on here exactly? Something's going on here very obviously. Gordon Chang is a senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute. Gordon, thank you so much for coming on. So just given everything we've seen in the past 10 days, what do you think is happening?
I think that, first of all, the 3 objects shot down Friday, Saturday, Sunday, probably from China or from Russia. Remember, the objects shot down on Friday and Saturday approached the United States from the north. And so that means Russia. It could be the Russians doing it. It could be the Chinese using Russian soil. But we also got to remember that we're coming on the eve of the 1-year anniversary of Russia's attack on Ukraine. And maybe the Chinese are trying to divert us from perhaps what the Russians are going to do. I don't know. But the thing, Tucker, is the Biden administration needs to talk to us. Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, talked to the Canadian people about shooting down the object on Saturday. You'd think Biden would want to talk to the American people about the 3 objects that were shot down over American territorial airspace.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible he's just not capable of doing that. So in the last day or so, it was over the weekend, China announced that there was a balloon over their territory, suggested it was ours. Of course, we'd never take that at face value, but what do you think that was?
This is China just trying to make excuses, and this is propaganda. If the Chinese had detected an American balloon in Chinese territorial airspace, they would have talked about it immediately. Now they're saying that there were 10 of these American balloons in China last year. That's just not credible. Also, people know that the U.S. does not have a spy balloon program. So clearly, we don't have it. And the Chinese would certainly have yelled and screamed if we had violated their airspace.
Really quick, if you could just sum it up, does all these developments strike you together as ominous?
Yes, they do, because it shows, certainly the Chinese balloon intrusion shows an utter disregard and disrespect for the United States by floating that over our most sensitive facilities. And that really means that deterrence is now lost, which means the Chinese are probably going to do whatever they want, which means we're going to be in a very difficult situation, perhaps over the United States, but certainly in Asia as well.
Yeah. Disrespect is never a good sign. Not in the prison chow line, not in international affairs. It's not good. Gordon Chang, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tucker.
So we told you the other night, it's kind of an amazing story of a 73-year-old rancher in Arizona who lives right on the border, who, for reasons that we didn't know at the time, shot a foreign national who was on his property and is now being held on $1 million bail on first-degree murder charges. Tonight we found out what exactly happened on his ranch, and it's mind-boggling. More on that next.
Fox Nation.
Pretty stunning story that we brought you last week. The state of Arizona is currently prosecuting a man on first-degree murder charges, an elderly man who shot an illegal migrant who trespassed on his property. That's legal under Arizona law. So when we told you the story the first time, we didn't know the man's defense, what actually happened on the ranch. Now we do know, and it's amazing. Fox's Trace Gallagher has it for us tonight. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, it's notable also the rancher is being charged with first-degree premeditated murder, meaning that prosecutors think he planned this. But so far, there is little evidence to support that, and the defense is contradicting that claim. The rancher, 73-year-old George Kelly, says on the day of the shooting, he was finishing up his morning chores and went back to his house to have lunch with his wife. As they were eating, the defense attorney says the couple heard a single gunshot. Mr. Kelly went outside and saw his horse running away. That's when the rancher and his wife say they saw a group of men dressed in khakis and camouflage, armed with AK-47s. Now, records show the rancher called Border Patrol agents who specialize in helping people who live along the border. A few minutes later, he called the agents again. And while he was waiting for them to arrive, Kelly says one of the armed men pointed a gun in his direction. So he fired several warning shots in their direction, aiming well above their heads. When Border Patrol agents arrived, they walked the property. They found nothing. Later, Mr. Kelly says he walked his property and he found the body of 48-year-old Gabriel Cuen Butamea, a Mexican national with a history of crossing into the U.S. and being deported. So far, there is no motive. It's unclear what type of weapon killed the Mexican national or if he and the rancher had ever had contact before. But we should note that George Kelly is being held on $1 million bond. Tucker.
It's beyond belief. Trace Gallagher, thank you for that report tonight. So here is an equally amazing but much happier story. So a few days ago in Iowa, an 83-year-old man was driving with his dog to go ice fishing. He had a fishing shack out on the lake. Then the man's Jeep fell through the ice and into the lake. Several rescuers jumped into action because Iowa is an extremely nice state. And one of the rescuers was a 17-year-old high school student called Joseph Salmon. He was ice fishing with his mom when he saw the Jeep go under. He was able to help save the man and his dog. And so we wanted to talk to him tonight, and we are. Joseph Salmon joins us tonight. Joseph, thank you so much for coming on. Few things scarier than someone going under the ice. How did you help get this man and his dog out?
So as soon as I seen him go into the water, I turned around and yelled at my mom and told her he went through, and I had 911 ready to dial because as I seen him going over there. I seen him go through. As I was running, I called 911. Ran over there, and for a second I was standing on the shoreline, and another guy came down, and we were like waving at him, trying to tell him get out of the Jeep, and he was kind of in shock, didn't really know what to do. He was just kind of sitting there. And as we were waving him, more people came down, and one of the guys said there's a child in the Jeep. And as soon as someone said there was a child, I got everything I needed off my first layer, and I jumped into the water, got to the Jeep, tried opening the back door, which it was locked, so it would not open, and I broke the back window.
You went into the, oh, this is a little more dramatic than I realized. You went into the water in a frozen lake and smashed the back window? That's amazing. How did you get, was there a child in the Jeep, and how did you get the man and his dog out?
So after I broke the back window, I used a knife to break the back window, and he was, as I was breaking the back window, he was getting out of his seat, and he's starting to crawl through the back. And his foot was stuck between the center console and the seat. So I went all the way into the Jeep, into the front of it, pulled his leg out, pushed on the bottom of it to like push him up, and I like crawled back out to like have more room for him to come. And as he was coming, between the seat and the roof of the Jeep, it's not a very big gap, and he couldn't get through that. So I went back in the Jeep, I pushed him back towards the front and pushed him up. So on the Jeep back seat, there's like a lever on top of it to fold the seat down. So I pushed him back, I flipped the seat down and grabbed him by under his shoulders and started pulling him out.
How old are you?
17.
That's just an absolutely crazy story. I don't think 1 in 100, 1,000 people would get into a car going under a frozen lake. I mean, that is heroism, and I appreciate your coming on and telling us about it tonight. Joseph Salmon, thank you.
You're welcome.
Damn. So Kim Foxx, the Soros-backed prosecutor, has done so much to destroy Chicago, has found a new way to spring hundreds of, in many cases, violent criminals from jail. Jason Whitlock has uncovered the story. It's an amazing story, and he joins us next to explain it. We interviewed the comedian Roseanne Barr on Friday, and the conversation was so interesting. We asked her to stay for an hour for Tucker Carlson Today, which we shot. And we learned during the course of that hour that this is a very deep and interesting person who has seen a lot and learned even more. We talked to her about getting fired from ABC, but we also wound up in a long conversation with her about her relationship with God. The whole thing was amazing. Here's part of it.
Any deviation from their narrative is a racist or a whatever, you know, transphobe, homophobe, racist. Any deviation from their fascist boot in your face makes you a racist.
So,
but I said and you know, the first 5 people that called me a racist and said, "How could you do this?" They were African American, and Sarah Gilbert sitting there next to me, and she goes, "Don't answer them. Just let it go. Just let it go." And I'm like, 5 in a row? I'm hardly going to let it go. I'm hardly going to let it go, because that was always their thing, is just say, don't, you know, just ignore them. Let them call you a racist.
Don't defend yourself.
Don't defend yourself. So I said, no, I'm not going to do it your way, even though you are so proper and just love it. Love your proper privilege, but I'm going to step out and be a loudmouth Jew and open my mouth. Sorry. So I feel like, hey, what I said was true, and it was prescient. So F you all. You know?
I like your attitude, and of course I agree with you.
I had to get it from like going down in bed. When this happened to me, I fell in bed and people were calling me and I couldn't even speak. I mean, I had a nervous breakdown. I couldn't walk or speak or think.
And you must have learned a lot from all that suffering, though.
I learned, the greatest thing that I learned is that my faith that has always kept me strong, there's nothing that's going to ever shake it. Thank heaven. I wondered, but nothing can take me away from it. As low as it got, as hard as it got, as ugly as it got, nothing could shake it. That was the greatest of all. It really was. To stand in it and just know that it was true, it is true, and it will forever be true inside me. My connection to everything good is just as strong and beautiful as ever, and it has saved me 1,000 times, and it saved me again.
We didn't wake up thinking we'd be having an incredibly inspiring conversation with Roseanne Barr about God, but that's what it became, and it's absolutely worth watching. It's on Tucker Carlson today. Airs tomorrow, 7 a.m. So Kim Foxx, as you doubtless know, is the Soros-backed prosecutor who has done so much to destroy the beautiful city of Chicago. Since she took office, she has stopped prosecuting serious crimes like auto theft and a lot of others. Now Kim Foxx has found a new way, a stealthier way, to spring violent criminals from jail. So a Chicago cop called Ronald Watts was busted in 2013 for supposedly stealing a few $1,000s from a government informant. On the basis of that conviction, Fox is saying that any criminal cases remotely related to this cop must be dismissed. And on the basis, again, of that, unrelated, she's released about 200 criminals from jail. So most people didn't notice this. Jason Whitlock, host of Fearless, did. He just broke this story on The Blaze and joins us tonight to outline it. Jason, thank you so much for this piece, which is amazing, and I would recommend it to our viewers for sure. But give us the overview, if you would.
Well, USA Today, on its cover last Thursday, had a story about Jawan Nile, who is now deceased. He was killed in 2020, but he was the poster child for what this corruption that Kim Foxx is using to not. She's exonerating people that had any connection at all to Ronald Watts, who was a patrol sergeant who supervised people that worked in an area, the Ida B. Wells Homes District, south side of Chicago. And it's not that they're getting sprung from jail. They're getting major paychecks and exonerations. I think Jawan Nile in the USA Today story, he was this innocent victim until Ronald Watts' crew or people he supervised arrested him for drug possession. And the sisters talking and how this sent his life on a bad direction, and it was this drug arrest from this corrupt cop that just destroyed his life. What USA Today didn't tell you is that Jawan Nile had been arrested 10 other times over the previous 3 years, and so it was this 11th arrest by policemen supervised by Ronald Watts that destroyed his life and career and sent him on this terrible path. And the USA Today story was just filled with stories from career criminals who are claiming that Ronald Watts did these terrible things to them. Kim Foxx exonerates their record and then cuts them a check, $40,000, $80,000. One guy got $188,000, turned around and took that money, bought more drugs, got busted by the feds, and just recently got released from prison after serving time, after collecting this $190,000 from Chicago taxpayers. Tucker, this is an incredibly important story. I hope that your viewers go to my youtube.com/Jason Whitlock so I can unpack it all, because it's at the heart of what's being done to our criminal justice system. They're using Ronald Watts as a patsy and claiming that he destroyed Chicago, and it's just not true. It's a gimmick to undermine our criminal justice system.
I'm so grateful that you wrote this. I mean, most people check in a hotel, read USA Today, you have no idea that it's a lie and what it's covering, and you expose it. I appreciate that. Jason Whitlock, thank you. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. East Palestine, Ohio is not a huge place. It's a town of about 5,000 people, not far from Pittsburgh. For many years, East Palestine was known as the place that produced dishes and cups and pitchers for America's hotels. The enormous ceramics works there employed much of the town. That's all gone now, and predictably, East Palestine is a lot poorer for it. The median household income in the town is now less than $45,000. East Palestine is overwhelmingly white, and it's politically conservative. More than 70% of the voters in the surrounding county supported Donald Trump in the last election. That shouldn't be relevant, but as you're about to hear, it very much is. 11 days ago, a 150-car train derailed in East Palestine, and when it did, it spewed poisonous chemicals onto the ground and into the surface waters. After the crash, the Ohio State EPA found evidence of butyl acrylate in the Ohio River, as well as in the creeks and streams that feed it. Now, this was a concern for more than simply East Palestine, given that the Ohio River supplies drinking water to about 1/10 of the entire U.S. population. So this train derailment was an environmental disaster. Not an environmental disaster like climate change is, but an actual environmental disaster, a disaster that's hurting actual people. And then it got worse. Several days after the derailment, officials decided it was a good idea to set fire to the spilled chemicals. And the result of that decision was a giant toxic mushroom cloud over the entire region. You're seeing a picture of it on your screen right now. So given the evident crisis in East Palestine, how did the federal government, did the Biden administration respond? Well, under Pete Buttigieg, the Department of Transportation, which responds to train derailments, took decisive action. Pete Buttigieg announced something called Transit Equity Day. That's yet another day that we celebrate race-based federal funding that, despite the train derailment, does not apply to East Palestine because the people who live there are the wrong color. So instead, Buttigieg's DOT announced an $80 million project to improve the roads in Philadelphia and $24 million for the roads in Detroit, both of which vote Democrat. And then Mayor Pete talked about perhaps the most pressing problem in this country, which is that we have too many white construction workers. Mayor Pete said not a single word about East Palestine, Ohio. And that's not because everything was under control there. As the DOT was busy tweeting about Black History Month and transit equity, the governor of Ohio announced that that controlled burn of chemicals from the derailment could potentially kill thousands. And that shouldn't surprise you because vinyl chloride, when burned, turns into phosgene. That was the single most deadly poison gas used during World War I. And vinyl chloride was one of the chemicals on that derailed train in East Palestine. Here's the governor of Ohio.
Norfolk Southern Railroad is planning a controlled release of the vinyl chloride at approximately 3:30 p.m. The controlled release of the toxic chemicals also has the potential to be deadly if inhaled. Those in the red area are facing grave danger of death if they are still in that area. Those living in the orange area are at risk of severe injury, including skin burns and serious lung damage. To state the obvious, all of you need to leave as well, and I need to leave as well too. So.
Notice the tone and the chuckle at the end. That's Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio, a great defender of Ukraine. And he's just announced that, well, thousands of people in his state could die. But he doesn't seem panicked by it. It's not a hair on fire emergency. It's not like Kyiv is in peril. So after that controlled burn of the deadly chemicals, officials told residents within East Palestine that if you live within a 2-mile radius of the derailment, you had to shelter in place and keep your windows closed. Residents closer to the mushroom cloud were put up in a hotel. Within days, they were all let back into their home without the Department of Transportation in Washington saying a word. As one hazardous materials specialist put it, the whole town may be unsafe as a result of this. Watch.
The railroad company was responsible for this, and before these people went back to their homes, their homes should have been tested. Their homes should have been cleaned. From the onset, these people were being marginalized in an effort to mitigate this. And at first they were being told, go get a hotel and keep your receipts and we'll reimburse us. East Palestine is a very poor community. Some of these people don't have the money to go get the hotels and do all of and all this stuff. This really looks like a nuclear winter. And I said, well, pretty much, yeah. We nuked this town with chemicals, and this is what they're getting.
Now, imagine if this had happened in, well, the favored cities of Philadelphia and Detroit. Lots of poor people in those cities. Everyone feels for them. Everyone wants them to be safe. Imagine at the same time this has happened in Washington, D.C. and, say, Georgetown. Well, the National Guard would be called in. There'd be no mushroom cloud of toxic chemicals on the horizon. We can promise you that. And, of course, in both cases, if this affected the rich or the favored poor, it would be the lead of every news channel in the world. But it happened to the poor, benighted town of East Palestine, Ohio, whose people are forgotten and, in the view of the people who lead this country, forgettable. So no big deal. The hazmat specialist in that video, Sil Cagliano, explained to local media that it's not just vinyl chloride on the train. That's not the only threat. There's also ethylene gas. And we're quoting, "You're looking at 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line until you see potential long-term effects. This stuff seeks low-lying areas. It could be in sewers. It could be in nooks, crannies, and crevices." Of course. That's how poison gas works. Ask anyone in Verdun. And that would explain the effect that the chemical weapons expert just outlined, would explain why fish and animals are dying in the area without explanation, though of course the explanation is very obvious. One resident in East Palestine says his foxes are sick now. Watch this.
Taylor is an ODNR registered fox keeper. A couple of his foxes broke their legs trying to run after the initial derailment. One of his foxes even died.
Out of nowhere, he just started coughing really hard and just shut down, and he had liquid diarrhea and just went very fast.
Taylor tells me all of his foxes have been sick and acting different since the weekend. Some have abnormally puffy faces, including the one he's holding. He says they are not eating properly. Many are dealing with stomach issues and are acting lethargic.
This isn't how a fox should act. He's very weak, limp. His eyes are very watery and weepy.
Some of the foxes are pacing rapidly in their pen, another sign they are not well.
Yeah. Pay attention to the animals, always. There's a reason the phrase canary in the coal mine is a cliche. So after all of this becomes public, that the water and the air in and around East Palestine, maybe in the region, could be contaminated, finally, Pete Buttigieg, the Department of Transportation, decided to weigh in. Quote, "Our federal partners at EPA are on site and monitoring indoor and outdoor air quality." Oh, air quality. What about water? Oh, water. What does that have to do with climate change? Well, it's the one thing you can't do without. After about 2.5 days, you die. But they're not even checking the water. They're only checking the air a week after people were let back into their homes. And according to Mayor Pete, the EPA hasn't even screened 200 homes in close proximity to the burn that wasn't organic or accidental. It was authorities burning it. So they just don't care, actually. Could that be clearer? While residents in East Palestine were inhaling toxic fumes, Mayor Pete was joking about the Chinese spy balloon his boss allowed to fly across the country. He's a funny guy. Watch this.
I mean, if you look at what the American transportation systems have faced in the last 2 or 3 years, partly because of the pandemic, we've faced issues from container shipping to airline cancellations. Mm-hmm. Now we got balloons.
That's right.
So you're completely incompetent, There's never been a cabinet secretary this flamboyantly incompetent and this so obviously uncaring, almost to the point of evil, if we're being honest about it. And then a little joke at the end, That was Mayor Pete yesterday, nearly 2 weeks after the disaster in Ohio. Now, was this disaster predictable? Well, we're not sure. Netflix made a movie about it last year. A train derails in Ohio and spills toxic chemicals everywhere. Some of the locals in East Palestine were actually extras in that film. But no one saw it coming. It never could have happened. Right. Well, it is coming out now, and again, we're not exactly sure why this train derailed, but according to a report in Jalopnik, the train involved in the derailment, Norfolk Southern, lobbied federal regulators for about a decade so they wouldn't have to improve their emergency brakes. The Biden administration, like the previous two administrations, didn't push the issue, and apparently the emergency brakes on this particular train failed during this incident. Now, again, there's a lot of propaganda here. There's unions involved. There are a lot of people who will benefit from assigning blame to this disaster. So we're not going to endorse any theory about why it happened. We're only going to note that Mayor Pete, who's in charge of finding out why it happened, doesn't seem interested at all. And like everybody else in New York, Washington, and LA, he's just kind of pretending it didn't happen and telling us little jokes. But we are interested in why it happened and in its effects, and for that reason, we're grateful to be joined right now by Nathan Izotic. He is a resident of East Palestine. He lives just 2 miles from where it happened, and he joins us now with his wife, Kelly. Thank you both so much for joining us. Are you concerned about being there right now?
Yes, we are.
Very.
Very. I bet you are. Are you seeing effects? I mean, it seems from our perspective, hundreds of miles away, like there are dangerous chemicals in your town. Are you seeing the effects of that?
We are seeing them locally inside of our bodies, what we're experiencing. Local fish in our creeks have died. Oily sheens and coloration in our water. Constant smell of burning plastics and chemicals in the air. Issues with our dog, vomiting, acting lethargic. It's scary stuff here, Tucker.
Well, it's horrifying. It's horrifying. It's a nightmare. And again, if that had happened in Washington, D.C., no one would be living there right now. Is there any federal presence? Are you getting the sense that anybody to whom you send your tax dollars every year cares about what happens to you?
At this moment, unfortunately not.
No. So there are no EPA officials in hazmat suits, no one from the Department of Transportation's walking around trying to figure out how this happened, how to prevent it again, that you have seen?
Nobody's knocking on our door.
How many of your neighbors are still there?
Our neighbor across the street and our next door neighbor, they came back on this past Saturday as well when we returned back home. And that was days after when they said it was safe to return, and we still didn't feel comfortable. And as soon as we got into the Ohio line, we immediately smelled the chemicals yet again. And since then, I now have the chemical burns and reaction rash on my face, and my throat is getting irritated again, and feeling very uneasy, very uneasy.
Man, I'm so sorry. And I'm just assuming, looking at the numbers, I've never been to East Palestine, but it looks like a lot of people there probably don't have anywhere else to go.
That's just the thing. We actually just moved here last May and got a nice 14-acre property, place to kind of call our final home, and we're outskirts of the town where the incident happened, but in town, I mean, it's a very small knit area, and a lot of them are lower class and low income, and fortunately we had a place to go on Sunday whenever we got the 2-mile evacuation order, but a lot of those families unfortunately didn't, and this should have happened on Friday, whenever
when the initial crash
when it initially happened, and the chemicals were for whatever reason not released or known. And in my opinion and in my industry, there's a paper trail with anything, especially when it comes to rail cars. There are SDSs, there are manifests, and even if they didn't know, benefit of the doubt, what happened then, it's a simple call to the producer, and they can have it to you in minutes. So there's a lot of fishy stuff going on. Yeah.
They know what's in their rail cars. Of course they do. Nathan Kelly, thank you for joining us, and Godspeed in East Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So residents in the town were told they could return to their homes shortly after authorities burned the toxic chemicals and created the poisonous mushroom cloud you have seen. Now the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, says the tap water probably isn't safe to drink. But at the same time, you can't drink the tap water because it's filled with poisonous chemicals. DeWine is telling the people of Ohio it's okay to go back home. Watch this.
I think that I would be drinking the bottled water, and I would be continuing to find out what the tests were showing as far as the air. I would be alert and concerned, but I think I would probably be back in my house.
You got to think it's possible for the Ohio legislature to pass a law tonight forcing Governor DeWine to move to East Palestine indefinitely and just see how he does. Drink a little bottled water. Just stay alert. Dr. Jeanette Neshawat is the director of City MD. She joins us tonight to assess. Doctor, thank you for coming. How concerned would you be? Would you be eager to move to East Palestine tonight?
Absolutely not, Tucker. You know, there's a variety of chemicals on that train, from isobutylene, ethylene oxyl, acetyl, and vinyl chloride. And of course, the greatest concern was vinyl chloride, because this is one of the most toxic, poisonous chemicals on the planet, such that it is listed as a human carcinogen. What does that mean? It means it has the potential to cause cancer, liver cancer, breast cancer, leukemias, blood cancer. And so on top of that, when you burn it, which is what they're doing now, a controlled burn, then you have byproducts. Those byproducts can be lethal as well. As you mentioned earlier, phosgene, this is a lethal chemical that has been used as a weapon in World War I, and it's even listed on the CDC website. They have an emergency preparedness protocol in case you come into contact with phosgene. So all these chemicals, and the EPA that we know of so far are only testing for vinyl chloride, but what about the ethyl hexyl? What about the butyl acetate and all these other chemicals that are causing the symptoms like your previous guest has been experiencing? Headache, sore throat, irritation of the eyes, burning of the skin, difficulty breathing, the decease of, the death of the fish, the wildlife, the chickens, the pets, the animals. So it's of great concern. We need to see FEMA out there on the ground, and we probably had a premature clearance by the EPA to return the citizens back into that community.
Yeah, it's not about climate, so they don't care. Dr. Neshwat, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Nick Sortor is a video journalist who is on the ground there in East Palestine, Ohio. He's spoken to business owners and residents of the town. He joins us. Now, Nick, thank you so much for coming on. It makes me feel bad we're not there, but we're glad that you are. What's your assessment of the town right now?
So what's going on the ground is a little bit different from what you might see in the media. The sentiment from the residents seems to be that they are super annoyed at how the federal government, how the Biden administration in particular, is handling this situation. You have the EPA in particular, they won't talk to any of the residents. You have people that are right up there. I spoke with a small business owner that was, their business was right in front of where the explosion was. They can't get anything out of the EPA. The federal government came in for a few days, took over their entire business, would not let them in, okay? But also wouldn't talk to them and wouldn't give them a plan, wouldn't tell them anything. And that's exactly how it's going for everybody that's in this town. So they don't know if they're going to be abandoned by the federal government, and they don't know if their town's going to be wiped off the map. And it's really sad when you're talking to these people, because they are terrified that this town that they grew up in, that they've lived in for their entire lives, is going to be completely demolished by people having to leave, people scared to even come back to the town. There's a myriad of people that do not believe the EPA's assessment that the town is okay to go back into, so they just haven't bothered. And that is a really scary thing, to think that the federal government cannot be trusted enough to be able to tell us whether or not it's safe to go in an area like this.
Well, they forced the COVID vaccines on the country, so I think they can't be trusted. But I'm just interested, as a factual matter, is the EPA tracking where this cloud of chemicals went? I mean, it was a local problem, it became a regional problem. Do we have any information on the effects of those clouds of chemicals?
Yeah, so Tucker, the EPA is not releasing a lot of the data that they've supposedly been collecting. They were supposed to release data last week on water samples, right? How was the water supply contaminated? Was groundwater contaminated? They have not done any of that. Okay, that's another thing that residents are complaining about a lot, because they don't even know if they can trust their own tap water. They don't want to turn on their taps. A lot of these people do have wells, but they have no clue if their groundwater has been contaminated.
It's just,
so, I mean,
it's
how do you
beyond
live
belief.
like that? This is America. This is a first world country. I mean,
yeah, or was. Nick Sortor, I sure appreciate that report from the scene in East Palestine, Ohio. Thank you. So for over 2 years now, we have been treated to endless lectures about democracy, preserving I'm defending democracy. Well, if you wanted to destroy democracy, what's the first thing you would do? Let people from other countries choose your leaders. That's not democracy, of course. It's the opposite. But Democrats are openly trying to do that now. Let's let the residents of other countries vote in our elections. For real. More on that next. For decades, prominent Democrats have bragged in public, we're going to open the borders so we get more reliable voters. If you notice this, then you're some kind of creepy, bigoted, great replacement theory wacko. Oh, you're crazy. Shut up, racist. But it's true, they say it, and now they're not even hiding it. All over the country, in Democratic-controlled areas, it's become common to allow illegal aliens to vote in elections. So foreign citizens, foreigners, get to pick your leaders. How is that democracy? That's not democracy. The opposite of democracy. Well, that's tyranny, of course. San Francisco, Chicago, New York City have already allowed this to happen. Now it's become federal. 162 Democrats in the House of Representatives have just voted to allow illegal aliens to vote in Washington, D.C. elections. So you're a resident of D.C., you're an American citizen, but your vote is canceled by a foreigner. Someone, a holder of a foreign passport who's sworn allegiance to a foreign flag gets to pick your leader. Democracy? No, not even close. Here's D.C. Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton.
There's a long history in the United States of non-citizens being allowed to vote in local, state, territorial, and federal elections. D.C. residents, a majority of whom are black and brown, are worthy and capable of governing themselves. It is true Congress has absolute power over D.C., but might does not make right.
Oh, so if something happened in American history for a while, it's okay? Is that what you're saying, you moron? And yes, the citizens of D.C. and every place in America have a right to govern themselves. She's saying you should be governed by foreigners. Thomas Massie is a member of Congress from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and we're honored to have him join us tonight. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on. How is this not the most obvious attack on democracy?
It is an attack, and after years of bleeding about Russian interference, the Democrats have now voted to let Russian nationals and Chinese communists vote in our elections. Now, Eleanor Holmes Norton was correct, but what she didn't tell you, Tucker, is you had to own land back then. In other words, you were presumed to be a citizen if you owned land back then to vote. I'm pretty sure she doesn't want to go back to those days. And here's the crazy thing. There are at least, right? There are about 50,000 foreign nationals in Washington, D.C., and as you pointed out, some of them have a visa, but about half of them don't have a visa. They came here illegally. And I asked the ranking member, Jamie Raskin, since D.C. allows people who are in jail and prison to vote, does this mean that an illegal alien who is in prison can vote in Washington, D.C.? And he wouldn't say that they couldn't.
So this is of special concern now, not just because it's philosophically repulsive, but because we have tens of millions of illegal aliens, foreign nationals, holders of foreign passports, sworn allegiance to a foreign country, living in the United States. And our elections are determined by tens or hundreds of thousands of votes. So if they can all vote, then we're done. Like, why aren't people outraged by this?
Well, I am outraged, but obviously 162 Democrats aren't because they voted to allow it to happen. So it's just insane, really, Tucker.
I would say. On this, as on so many issues, a rare voice of sanity, Thomas Massie, member of Congress from Kentucky. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Tucker.
So if you want to know how free your society is, you just ask a really basic question. Am I allowed to make fun of the people in charge? Can I mock them? Can I tweet them? Not with violence, but with words. And if you can, it's a free country. If you can't, it's not. So you should be concerned that comedians are under sustained attack in this country, sometimes physically. And we thought it'd be interesting to make a documentary about it, investigating the death of comedy. It's for Fox Nation. Here's part of it. Can't make fun of the people in charge. You're not free. The documentary is called The Death of Comedy. It's out tomorrow on Fox Nation. So 20 years ago, no one would even dare to suggest applying affirmative action standards to airline pilots or air traffic controllers, but the Biden administration has mandated that, and the inevitable result is millions of lives at risk. For real. It's not a rhetorical point. We've got examples and new information from within the airlines. Next. Commercial air travel in the United States has long been the safest in the world. So safe you never think about it. When was the last time a big jet crashed in this country? What, October 2001? Decades ago. But like so much else, that began to change immediately after Joe Biden became president. Biden imposed the principles of equity on the airlines. And that meant dramatically lowering hiring standards for pilots, and for air traffic controllers, and disgracefully, the airlines went along with it. Result? There have been several near disasters in aviation recently, with hundreds of lives at stake in each case. Last Wednesday, for example, a United flight was coming in for a landing at Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston. The aircraft was low enough that passengers could clearly see the runway. Right before landing, a plane on the ground taxied out into the path of the United flight. The pilot aborted the landing so dramatically that people on board were terrified. It was another near miss at an American airport, though this one never made the news. What's happening here? We wanted to know what is going on in commercial aviation. Clearly something is. So we reached out to someone who's flown for the airlines for many years. The following account was written in December by a veteran United Airlines pilot. Under its woke CEO, Scott Kirby, United Airlines has allowed politics and racialist ideology to trump safety concerns. According to this pilot who works for Scott Kirby right now, those decisions have put the lives of passengers in grave danger. Quote, "Name redacted just told me about a B777 off Maui that almost crashed 2 nights ago. Both pilots became disoriented and pulled out of a dive 300 feet above the water, pulling 2.5 Gs. I'm just home from Denver Training Center. There's some real horror stories out there about United, but management is hell-bent on just ignoring what is going on. The investigation is still ongoing, but the captain of the Maui flight was brand new. There was a new hire first officer, and my understanding is that we almost lost an airplane for no good reason. Both have been sent back to go through the 4-week course. The new hire here on my fleet is a nightmare. It took him 50 hours to get through initial operating experience. Worse yet, talking to his instructor, out of his 25 landings in the simulator, 15 ended up in the dirt. Not one of them was on the center line of the runway. They said his radio work was like that of a private pilot. He has no situational awareness. I'm jump seating to SFO right now. A United B777 first officer is next to me. She said the training is totally inadequate for new hires. Her husband helps train them at United's in-house pilot academy, Aviate. He's constantly asking these kids who come in, has anyone told you what this is? Many have no idea what they're getting into. They're hiring people straight out of high school now. Zero aviation knowledge or desire. It's just about the money and adhering to ESG. End quote. And it's not just United. It's everywhere. Southwest Airlines' in-house pilot training program, called Destination 225, has dramatically lowered its standards. Many of its graduates wind up working for a charter company called Swift Air, which is under contract from the Biden administration to fly illegal aliens around the country without the American population knowing about it. But other graduates wind up flying for Southwest Airlines. Last year, a newly hired first officer on a Southwest flight, formerly a flight attendant, hit the runway so hard on landing that a crew member was gravely injured. So this is what it looks like in real terms when you decide that identity is more important than aptitude in something critical like aviation. At some point, many people are going to die because of this. You should know that. Last night, there was a horrible shooting on the campus of Michigan State University, and once again, as is so often the case, we're learning that prosecutors failed to do their duty and protect the rest of us. Fox's Trace Gallagher has that story for us tonight. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Tucker, the Michigan State shooter is identified as 43-year-old Anthony McCrae. His father says McCrae turned bad after his mom died a few years ago. And the father says he pled for his son to give up his guns. But now we know the father didn't have to plead, because in 2019, Anthony McCrae was arrested and charged with carrying a concealed weapon without a permit, a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison. But at the time, the Ingham County, Michigan DA was Carol Seaman. She was from the George Soros lineup of progressive prosecutors, including George Gascon in Los Angeles and Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. So in 2019, DA Seaman ended the mandatory sentencing for felony firearms charges, allowing Anthony McCrae to plead down to a misdemeanor and serve a year of probation. Now, some argue that even with the mandatory sentencing guidelines, it would have been unlikely that McCrae would have served 5 years, and they may be right. But that's not the point, because had he been convicted of a felony, McCrae would have been prevented from owning a firearm when his sentence was up. Instead, the misdemeanor charge left him eligible to purchase and own a gun, which he did. Today, President Biden and several Democratic lawmakers talked about tougher gun laws. None of them talked about increasing or enforcing penalties for gun crimes. In 2019, DA Carol Seaman said that sentencing enhancements lead to dramatic racial inequity and is not linked to the goal of keeping people safe. The families of 8 Michigan State students might beg to differ. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher, the great Trace Gallagher, for us tonight. You can see Trace every night at midnight. Thank you. Kelly Show, and a very wise man, actually. He joins us tonight. Jesse, does narcissism, does living for yourself, when it's always about you, is that the road to joy and fulfillment? I wonder.
You know, I wonder why you called me a wise man, Tucker, because I'm actually very stupid. You see, when I was a kid, I thought I was wise. I thought I was very intelligent. I did. And you know why I thought that, Tucker? Because I had a mom who loved me, and she was always, Jesse, you're the smartest, and Jesse, you're the best. And then one day, I'm 18 years old, and I got a 0.0 grade point average in college. I'm not making that up. And I realized, you're not actually smart. Everything you've been told is a lie, Jesse. You're actually quite stupid, and you're going to have to deal with that. That's what you see women like Chelsea Handler, feminists like Chelsea Handler, going with now. They've been lied to by their society forever, that you could be a girl boss and you can do anything a man can do, which everyone who's ever seen a woman back up a vehicle knows that's not true. But either way, they've been told that they should do career and don't do a family or anything like that. And soon you're Chelsea Handler. Soon it's Valentine's Day and your womb resembles a dried up tumbleweed blowing down an old western town. And your Valentine's Day date for the 10th year in a row is a 10-year-old copy of Magic Mike and a half-full bottle of Xanax, and you're trying to pretend like you're happy, but you're not happy. And it's actually not her fault. She's been lied to by a country that has lost its way.
It's just, rather than, I mean, there really is, not an overstatement, a crisis of solitude. People are alone. Man is not meant to be alone. Solitary confinement is a punishment. It's the worst punishment. But rather than dealing with it, like obesity, they're redefining it as good. How dark is that?
We redefined everything as good, Tucker, but you're right about this. We tell people that whatever choices you make, no matter what you do, no matter where you end up, it's all good, it's all fine. There are no goals, there's no achievement, there's no this or that. It's all just a bunch of meaningless nothing. And now we have a society full of people that are sad. They don't even, a lot of people don't even know why they're sad, but they're sad, they feel directionless, because we've taken that from them. It's not just feminism, it's across our society. We've built sad people almost intentionally. It is a bummer.
Really quick, you've been successful. You can kind of order whatever you want off Amazon. Do consumer products make you happy in the end, do you think?
Well, it depends, Tucker. Most of the time not, but I did find out some Cinnamon Toast Crunch mixture. There's actually a mixture of the cinnamon powder and the sugar that you can buy and actually put it on anything. So most things don't make me happy, but that's most definitely did.
You know what? That's totally fair. That's why I called you the great Jesse Kelly. Thank you. Great to see you tonight.
See you, boss.
So George Gascon, the Soros-backed district attorney in Los Angeles, is supposed to prosecute, but that's the opposite of what he does. He stopped punishing theft in LA. And as a result, a lot of businesses are getting robbed, in a lot of cases violently with weapons. And in some cases, clerks, thank God, are fighting back. One of those clerks is tonight's Employee of the Month. So this lunatic comes in wielding a long knife, looks like a butcher knife, and tries to rob a mini-mart in LA's Westlake neighborhood. And the clerk grabbed the knife. You're seeing the pictures on your screen right now, of course. The clerk then ran the robber out of the store at knife point. The store's owner, Rena Amaya, said the clerk is, quote, a brave girl. Well, that's an understatement. A total heroine, has a permanent spot waiting for her on this show. And needless to say, the suspect remains at large. So it's Valentine's Day. Of course, happy Valentine's Day. And we realized that Dr. Jill is in a very tough spot. Who should she celebrate with tonight? We're not sure. We'll let you decide after the break. Valentine's Day, and if you're a man, that can be anxious making. What to buy? Is a card and a bouquet of flowers enough to express your love? Most men really don't like Valentine's Day, as you know if you are one. But Joe Biden is uniquely unburdened by that anxiety because he has no idea it's Valentine's Day, and if he did, he wouldn't know who to celebrate with. Here he is confusing his sister for his wife.
They don't call Super Tuesday for nothing. By the way, This is my little sister, Valerie, and I'm Jill's husband. Oh, no, this is oh, you switched on me. This is my wife. This is my sister. They switched on me.
Yeah, they switched them on me. It's pretty funny. In a sad way. Are they really going to make a senile guy president? Are they really that cynical? Yeah, they are. But at least you can mock it. But if you're Dr. Jill, it's not as funny. That's your husband. You're married to him. You had a child with him. That's got to sting a little bit. On some level, she's got to be human, maybe deep, deep inside. So how is she feeling tonight? Who's she going to spend Valentine's Day with? Well, if the State of the Union is any indication, she may have a second-string dude to spend it with. The second gentleman. Watch. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. East Palestine, Ohio sits directly on the border of Pennsylvania. It's just feet away. So anything significant that happens there in East Palestine, say a toxic mushroom cloud rising thousands of feet over the town, is certain to affect the state next door. And that's why 3 days after a train derailed there, spilling a great volume of dangerous chemicals onto the ground and into the water, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, held a press conference about it. Shapiro announced that authorities had decided to set those chemicals on fire. And that was a very good thing. No one should be unduly alarmed. The burning of these chemicals, Shapiro said, had gone, quote, as planned. Officials on the scene, meanwhile, declared the burn, quote, perfect. Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, agreed with all of this. The people in charge, the railroad's engineers, and the state officials overseeing them had everything under control. So 2 days later, evacuation orders for residents were officially lifted, both in East Palestine and over the border in Pennsylvania. That was last week. In the subsequent days, a lot of people have wondered out loud, was it really a wise decision to light thousands of gallons of vinyl chloride on fire, releasing a World War I-era bioweapon into the air over a populated area? Was that a good call? And was it really safe 2 days later for people to go back to their homes? And if it was safe, how do we know that? Is anyone in charge actually monitoring with any accuracy the level of deadly chemicals in the air, ground, and water in and around East Palestine? Well, no, apparently nobody is. And that's highly upsetting when you think about it. Talk about a failure at all levels. The first duty of government is to protect its citizens. So it's bad. And it's very bad news for reckless politicians like Josh Shapiro and Mike DeWine, who may have helped make this disaster much worse. So tonight, both DeWine and Shapiro are desperately trying to revise their previous statements about the so-called controlled burn. Both have now decided that the toxic mushroom cloud over East Palestine, the one they signed off on and endorsed on television, was actually a bad thing. It didn't go as planned. It wasn't perfect. And both governors have now identified the villain here, not as themselves, no, of course not, but as the railroad, Norfolk Southern. Both are considering lawsuits against the company. In an act of amazingly brazen butt covering, Josh Shapiro even wrote a letter to the White House and the Transportation Department, claiming that Norfolk Southern was, quote, unwilling to explore or articulate alternative courses of action to their proposed vent and burn. It was very obvious, he says, that there was probably a, quote, safer overall approach for first responders, residents, and the environment. That was very obvious. He just never said anything about it. It's remarkable. And for the record, we are not defending Norfolk Southern here. We're only pointing out that Norfolk Southern had the strong endorsement of Josh Shapiro and Mike DeWine when it set those chemicals on fire and caused the mushroom cloud. And by the way, the Biden administration endorsed it too. According to Pete Buttigieg, Biden officials were on the scene. Yet somehow they never said a word about the mushroom cloud until pictures of it evoked outrage on social media. And of course they didn't. They didn't even notice. It had nothing to do with equity or climate change. East Palestine is a poor white town that voted for Trump, so honestly, who cares? No one in the Biden administration did care, and that's an atrocity. The people whose indifference made it possible should lose their jobs, beginning with Pete Buttigieg and extending to Governors Josh Shapiro and Mike DeWine. They didn't care, and they got caught not caring. Even tonight, Mike DeWine clearly still doesn't care. Here he is insisting everything's fine.
So if it were your family, Governor, you'd be okay sending everybody back home?
Yeah, look, I mean, we indicated that. We're going to continue to test the air. We're going to continue to test the water. But what that is indicating is that it is very, very safe.
Yes, we indicated that. Kind of a clinical response. and a dishonest one because, of course, Mike DeWine is not living in East Palestine, and there's no chance of that ever. Animals in East Palestine are dying by the thousands, and you don't need to be a chemist to know that's not a good thing. The town has been poisoned.
Residents worry about what's still in the air, soil, and water of their rural community.
Don't tell me it's safe. Something's going on if a fish are floating in the creek.
Ohio officials confirming some 3,500 fish died in local waters in the days after the derailment, but insist extensive testing shows there's no threat to other wildlife or humans. They say there's only anecdotal evidence of residents getting sick and no confirmed connection to the hazardous chemicals aboard the train.
Oh, there's only anecdotal evidence, also called observed reality. Maybe Tony Fauci will show up soon to lecture us about the science. Amanda Bashirs will probably not listen. She lives there, 10 miles from East Palestine in Lima, Ohio. She says that even at Lima, at that distance, burning chemicals smell like chlorine and hurt her eyes. And she also says her chickens, and this is not a good sign no matter what they say, are dying without explanation.
I walked up to the cage and this is what I found.
Amanda Bashirs was going to feed her 5 hens and rooster this morning when she discovered them all lifeless, practically in the same position, with no signs of a predator entering their enclosure.
I'm beyond upset and quite panicked because they may be just chickens, but they're family.
Bashirs says her chickens were alive and well yesterday. She believes the smell following the detonation of the train carrying chemicals that derailed in East Palestine is to blame for her birds' sudden death.
My video camera footage shows my chickens were perfectly fine before they started this burn. And as soon as they started the burn, my chickens slowed down and they died. If it can do this to chickens in one night, imagine what it's going to do to us in 20 years.
So as always, if you want to know what people really think, ignore what they say. Words are cheap and people lie. Watch what they do. Mike DeWine may say it's safe to be in East Palestine, but you'll notice he's not spending the night there. One woman who does live there noticed that federal officials, while assuring everybody everything was fine, were wearing hazmat suits.
When you watch people that are investigating, they all have these giant hazmat suits on. But somehow it's safe for people to go back to these homes. They only evacuated a mile out-ish. Anybody outside of that, you're kind of on your own. If you want to leave, you can leave. If you want to drink bottled water, go for it, buy it. If you want to, but it's all on our own dime. And this is caused by, a company who makes billions of dollars and we're forgotten about.
So the people who live there obviously want some answers. It's totally safe, says the guy in the hazmat suit. So residents of East Palestine Center gathered for a town hall. The mayor has just told residents that he has not heard from anyone in the White House, didn't until yesterday when it started to become a political liability for them. The mayor also said he has no idea where Pete Buttigieg is tonight. We know where Caitlin Schwartzwalder is tonight. She's right outside the town hall where no officials from the Biden administration or the train company bothered to show up. She's the owner of the Von Schwartz Doberman kennel in Pennsylvania. She's a dog person. She lives about a mile over the border from East Palestine. And she has just been asked to sign a waiver promising not to sue agencies monitoring the air near her property. We thought that was telling. Caitlin Schwartzwalder joins us tonight with her boyfriend, Chris Wells. Caitlin and Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Caitlin, if you'll just explain your experience with the official who asked you to sign a waiver?
Sure. So what I can tell you is that we would like to have independent testing done. And the people at Norfolk had suggested that they were going to offer services by an independent testing company to do air and water testing for us. When these people came to our property, the company was called CTEH. I call it CTEC. And they had approached our property, came to our driveway and said, we're here to test the water and soil. And I said, okay, so you guys are independent from Norfolk. And they said, well, not exactly. So then they handed us a contract. The contract stated that essentially Norfolk or any of its affiliates, were going to be, encroaching on the property. They were going to be doing the testing, and that it was essentially a hold harmless agreement. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but what I can tell you is that I did not want to risk anything for my future, the future of the business, by signing this contract. EPA was also there, and we had asked, Chris specifically had asked EPA if they could come in by themselves or without signing of any agreements, and they denied that.
Well, yeah, I mean, having the company whose train derailed test for the effects of the derailment is a little like putting Pfizer in charge of the FDA. Oh, I guess we did that. So, Chris, let me just ask you, you pay taxes like everybody in this country. Didn't you expect that when an environmental disaster like this happened, that state and federal EPA officials, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Biden administration would be on the scene seeing if you were poisoned or not?
Yeah, so I expected, I expected our government officials to have stepped up to the plate, EPA to step up to the plate, to start giving us direct answers. And we're not getting any direct answers as of right now. The wells even, they're saying that our soil and our water is good to go and the air is good to go, but, we still have animals that are dying, people that are having symptoms every single day. So, FEMA, where are you? Government officials, why aren't you stepping up to the plate?
Yeah. Well, my unsolicited advice is trust the anecdotal evidence. I'm sorry, Caitlin, go ahead.
So I think one of the things that we're trying to do here is to get independent testing done, and unfortunately, it's very expensive. We've had people, 3 different companies from environmental services, give us quotes, and those retainers are anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000. And I can speak from experience, and I can say that not many people in the area can afford that. So if we want to get, unbiased answers, then we have to spend money that we don't have.
Yeah. So, and what's the point of having an EPA? I appreciate both of you coming on tonight, Caitlin Schwartzwalder and Chris Wells. Thank you very much. So how bad is this? I mean, it does take some experience with the chemistry to really know that. Sil Caggiano is an expert in this. He's a hazardous waste authority. He says the town of East Palestine has effectively been nuked. He joins us tonight to explain what that means. So I appreciate your coming on. How do you, having spent your life assessing things like chemical spills, how do you assess the condition of East Palestine tonight?
It's very troublesome. These poor individuals, through no fault of their own, became victims of systemic failures within the rail transportation system, and it manifested itself in this mushroom cloud that they had to experience in their town. One of the reasons why I made the comment about we nuked a town with chemicals is because there was somebody from Darlington, Pennsylvania, who was videoing the cloud that had went over his property. And you could see fallout coming out of the cloud going onto his property. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, it reminds you of one of those apocalyptic shows where the nuclear fallout's coming out. And I thought about it and I says, well, yeah, we basically did nuke a whole town just to get a railroad going, back in service. And earlier on, I got involved in this because news media were not being told the truth. Days into this, no, train consist was available. They didn't know what they had. And that flies in the face of logic. If you're going to mitigate a problem, if you're going to have your fire department and other responding teams take care of it, you should know what the heck you've got. And it got to the point where they were showing me pictures of train cars, the local media, and I was identifying what was in based on UNID numbers or train car numbers. And when they told me their plan, at that point you had a few cars burning. They had unmonitored hand lines there keeping the tankers cool. And then I find out that they're pulling the unmonitored hand lines, keeping the tankers cool. I said, well, that's just going to cause the tanker cars to heat up, which they did. And then they announced that one was very near catastrophic failure. And I said, well, if they don't put water back on it, it's going to continue to heat up, and it's going to what's called a blevy, and it's going to damage other containers. And then I was told, no, they're going to detonate all these cars so that that doesn't happen. And I could tell you, Mr. Carlson, I've been looking at rail incidents over and over because in Youngstown, Ohio, there's 3 rail lines that run through our town. So as a chief and as a instructor, I trained my guys to anticipate stuff. And I would go case study after case study after case study coming up with different scenarios just to keep it going. And I've never once in 39 years ever heard of them blowing up train cars, dumping all the chemicals into a trench and lighting them on fire. I was dumbfounded. Yeah. And when you lit this stuff on fire, you were creating phosgenes, you were creating hydrogen chlorides, you created this plume, and up in this plume was all the incomplete combustion products of everything that was there. Stuff, if you looked at the guy's video, stuff is precipitating down into people's property. There's a lot of questions, and the answers came slow. And first you get, well, now we found vinyl chlorides in the water. Well, yeah, no joke. You're going to find that, and it seemed like everything was drips and dribbles. Instead of, one of the things I learned is you tell the truth, you tell it all, you tell it first, and you tell them how you're going to solve the problem. And none of that was forthcoming. And I began to worry about, what the end result with this was going to be. They had evacuated 1 mile, and I was telling the media they better do like 1.5, 2 miles. Well, subsequently after that, they went to 2 miles. And then within a few minutes, or a few days, they were bringing everybody back. And that was pretty much just in time to open up the rails, and there was no testing. There's got to be some plan going forward in this cleanup and recovery to test.
Yeah, I mean, if you find asbestos in your building, you contain and remove it. You don't blow it into the next county. It just seems self-evidently insane. Syl, I appreciate your coming on tonight. That was really, really interesting and sad. Thank you. It's worth remembering that as one of his first acts, maybe his first act as president, Joe Biden shut down an oil pipeline that we could use right about now on the grounds that it was too dangerous to move something as toxic as oil through a pipeline. You had to ship it by rail. That's a lot safer. And then, of course, they ignored the rail lines, and here we are. So you'd think in a moment like this, comedians would be rejoicing. There's so much to mock, but they're not, because they're too afraid to make fun of the people who run the government. So we decided to make a documentary on this. Is anybody in the comedy business brave enough to tell the truth anymore? And yes, there are some people. We found them. The new documentary is called The Death of Comedy. Here's a preview. So the Biden administration bragged for days about their missile acuity. They shot down lots of dangerous things over our country. Now it looks like they may have shot down some of our own balloons. Really? Did they really shoot down our own balloons? Apparently. More next. When you see people celebrating something they don't understand and couldn't possibly understand because there are no available facts, that ought to be a red flag. We don't know what it was, but we love it. That's not good. So last week, the Pentagon said it shot 3 objects out of the sky. We still don't know what they were, but the media were thrilled. So what were they? Shouldn't we know? As long as we're firing missiles at things, shouldn't we identify them? Well, here's the, quote, National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan.
We have not yet recovered any of those objects. One up in the wilds of Alaska, another in the wilds of the Yukon, the third over Lake Huron. So we cannot definitively say what any of them were. What we can say is that our intelligence community has, at this point, a leading explanation that they are looking at that, in fact, these objects are benign.
Oh, you're lying. You're lying. The wilds of Alaska? It's an American state. If Hunter Biden got lost in a crack binge in the wilds of Alaska, could we find him? Probably could. So you're starting to wonder, did we shoot down weather balloons? Seems like we may have. At the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, who is incapable of shame, was not ashamed by that.
If it turns out, as it looks like, that the president and Mr. Trudeau sent Top Gun fighters to blow weather balloons out of the sky, does the president regret that, and is he embarrassed by that?
I'm not going to get ahead of what of any final decision. We just don't know yet. We actually just don't know.
At some point, this is all going to end, and she's going to wind up back at the DMV where she started. You're going to go in for a new driver's license. She's going to say, we just don't have the available facts. So absolutely so perfect. But big picture, it looks like Mark Milley has finally found an enemy he can defeat. Unfortunately, it happens to be the National Weather Service. Douglas McGregor has spent a lot of time in uniform. He's a retired Army colonel. He joins us tonight. Doug, I hate even to laugh about this, but it's hard to know how to respond. Do you think it's possible that the U.S. military shot down weather balloons? And how credible is the claim they have no idea what they shot down?
Well, I think the second one is very credible. They probably don't know what they've shot down. And I'm not really very confident that what they think they found in the first one is real either. You know, given that the Chinese have 300 satellites orbiting the planet, 100 of which have military capabilities and technologies of surveillance at least as good as our own, you have to ask the question, why would you bother with a balloon? You don't need it. And we have an even bigger problem. We have the other nuclear detonation in addition to what you have in Ohio that doesn't get any coverage. That's the southern border. 5 million illegals have come over here since President Biden took office, including thousands of Chinese citizens. Where are they? What are they doing? Do they have jobs? Where are they living? And that is only in addition to the Chinese that we've already got working in our laboratories, corporate, government, university. I mean, talk about missing the game completely. This administration isn't even in the game.
I wonder, you commanded tanks famously in the first Gulf War. I think it was the last tank battle in history. Did you shoot at things and not know what they were? Like have no idea what it is, but we're just going to shoot it? Is that?
No. In fact, I gave very clear orders that no one was to engage any target unless they were absolutely sure it was the enemy. And that was not common. A lot of people wanted to shoot things from as great a distance as possible. But it's very important to do that. And in this case, I think the people at NORAD did their jobs. I've heard people say, are they not competent? Wrong. They're competent. They've seen this kind of stuff in the jet stream for years. You don't launch $400,000 missiles at it. They're on the ball, and they should not be viewed negatively at all. One wonders what Jake Sullivan and his friends have on their brain.
Yeah. I mean, I just know in my limited experience, in bird hunting, for example, you make sure it's a bird before you kill it. Doug McGregor, I appreciate your coming on with that perspective tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
You may remember when illegal aliens took over the El Paso airport. That seemed like a bad sign, but it could get worse. It always can. Now the homeless, the so-called homeless, have moved into Chicago International Airport O'Hare. Vagrants living in the terminals, sleeping by the baggage claims in one of the biggest and most famous airports in the world. As one custodian at O'Hare put it, it's out of control. None of us feel safe. And you can say that for the city itself. Raymond Lopez is an alderman in Chicago. He has been a very rare voice in that city calling for sanity. He's joining us tonight from O'Hare Airport. Alderman Lopez, thank you so much for coming on. What do you see there?
Tucker. No, good evening, Tucker. As we walk through the airport, the fourth largest airport in the United States, we've seen this beautiful gateway to Chicago been overrun by the homeless, where every night 200 to 300 homeless individuals come off public transportation and set up encampments here and baggage claim and throughout all 5 terminals. All the while, the mayor's voice is blasting from overhead, welcoming any one of the 65,000 daily visitors here in this indoor outhouse that we call O'Hare Airport.
How could the mayor of Chicago allow one of its most famous landmarks and a transportation hub for the whole country to be desecrated by people urinating in it? I don't understand.
You know, they're not just urinating in the hallways, they're taking baths in the toilets, they're making a mockery of what Chicago is here. And we understand that homelessness is a problem we must address, but making O'Hare Airport a homeless shelter for hundreds of people on a daily basis, when we're trying to welcome people here, when we're trying to encourage tourism, bring back the business clientele, bring back families to our city, and to only have them greeted by hundreds of homeless who have mental health issues, may be armed, maybe not even be clothed, that's not something that institutes a lot of confidence in our mayor, in our city, and clearly she doesn't care because she's 17 miles away from it.
Surrounded by city finance bodyguards, unlike you. There's an election coming up. She could win. How could that happen?
Right now, Tucker, we are 12 days away from the city's election, and as you know, we've been pushing hard to ensure that she does not have a path forward, but it's amazing in a city like Chicago that we have so many individuals who are hiding behind white guilt and privilege as an excuse to stick with the failed mayor. Rather than hold her accountable for what she's done and what she continues to do to this beautiful city, they're willing to stick by her just to assuage their personal guilt of privilege or wokeness, whatever they want to call it. And many of us continue to fight back. I know you had Dr. Wilson on your show as well, who's standing up against her. We have to fight back for this city because we can't allow what's happening here to become the mainstay for every neighborhood and for every iconic part of Chicago, which is overrun by the homeless, overrun by gangs, overrun by criminality, and what should be a welcoming city to all the good law-abiding people who want to make this home.
Boy, that is about the most incisive description of modern politics I've heard in a long time. Alderman Raymond Lopez of the city of Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, that's an incredibly depressing story. But it's also true that when evil emerges, it is always counterbalanced with good. And something like that seems to be happening in Kentucky, not far from Lexington. A church service for over a week has been continuously going on. It looks like a revival. We're going to talk to someone who was there and get a sense of what is happening. We'll be right back. And harder to explain a lot of the things that we're seeing in purely political terms. You have to reach for theological language to really understand it. Some of it's just evil. And who knows why, but it is. And a lot of people are starting to figure that out. And the good news is a lot of people are starting to think more about what happens when you die. They're becoming much more interested in the spiritual life, which has been basically extinguished in the public square for a long time. So here's a sign that people are becoming more interested. Asbury University, which is a private Christian college in Wilmore, Kentucky, outside Lexington, began hosting a prayer service a week ago, but it never ended. It's still going on. People just keep showing up from around the world. The university has even set up overflow chapels to accommodate demand. Here's what it looks like. So we keep hearing about this. There haven't been many news stories on it, but it's all over social media, on TikTok, actually, of all places. And reports that people are flying in from Singapore and New Zealand to join whatever this is. And so we thought it'd be worth finding out, what is it? Allison Perfader is the student body president at Asbury University, and she joins us tonight. Allison, you're so nice to come on. Thank you. What is this, do you think?
Right, what is this? That's what we I mean, that's the question, right? And a theme or a Bible verse that we've all been sharing with each other is Habakkuk 1. And the Lord says, look at the nations and watch, for I'm doing something in your day that you wouldn't believe if you were told. And it's happening, and we can hardly believe it.
Well, it seems remarkable. I mean, so many stories, you see them and you think, that's very different. I'm not quite sure what it means, but it's worth learning more. So my understanding is this began in a completely conventional service, and a boy got up and started talking about his own flaws, and then something changed in the atmosphere and it never ended. Is that fair?
That's completely what happened. So here at Asbury University, 3 mornings a week, we have chapel at 10 a.m. sharp. The whole student body gets together and we sing praise to the Lord, and we hear a message from a speaker. And for seemingly no reason at first, on Wednesday, February 8th, it didn't end. And that's kind of the logistical side of what's been going on. And then, you know, on the deeper side of things, what's been happening here since Wednesday is there's a young army of believers who are rising to claim Christianity, the faith, as their own, as a young generation and as a free generation. And that's why people can't get enough.
That's amazing. So you felt like something like this was going to happen because everything finds equilibrium, I think. Who are the people who are coming? Where are they coming from?
We don't know most of them. We've obviously been getting calls, hundreds of calls to the university switchboard number, but we have friends here from Brazil, from Indonesia, almost every state, and they just keep coming. And it's no wonder, you know, and it's like you said, I mean, especially in the midst of tragedies like what we've seen in Michigan State University and even farther back to 2020, especially our generation was impacted so much. And so you have to wonder, you know, what's going to break. And in this case, the Holy Spirit has interceded for us here at Asbury and across the nation.
I assume you don't know how long this will continue?
I could not tell you, and I wouldn't want to guess.
No, you wouldn't. Allison, thank you. Great to see you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Really, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, of course. So you remember Sam Brinton? He was the world-famous MIT-trained nuclear waste disposal expert who ran the program for Joe Biden. Well, he's in court today. He's accused of stealing ladies' underwear in their luggage at a bunch of different airports, presumably wearing it. It's not weird, by the way. Don't judge. Today he was at a preliminary hearing for stealing a $2,000 bag from the airport in Minneapolis. Brinton's lawyers had filed multiple requests for him to attend the hearing remotely, saying he's having, and we're quoting, employment issues. He sure is. The judge denied that request, but the judge did accommodate a far more significant demand from Sam Brinton. He went along with Brinton's request to be called MX. We're not going to guess how to pronounce it. MX Brinton instead of Mr. Brinton. So the bottom line is our gender fluid nuclear waste expert friend may be going to jail for up to 5 years, and he may not have a job, but at least he's not being misgendered. Well, a second university was found to be taking millions from China just after it was announced, and maybe there's a connection, that Joe Biden would be launching an institute at the school, the famous University of Pennsylvania, ladies and gentlemen. Details straight ahead. Back in December, we spoke to a woman called Isabel Vaughn Spruce. Isabel Vaughn Spruce was arrested for the crime of praying outside an abortion clinic in Birmingham, England. The clinic was closed at the time, but the police didn't care. Praying was enough. They charged her anyway. Well, now it's happened again. A Catholic priest has just been arrested by police in Birmingham for praying near the same abortion clinic. He was holding a sign saying he was praying for free speech. That priest is Father Sean Coe. He joins us with his legal counsel, Lorcan Price. He's with Alliance Defending Freedom UK. Father, Lorcan Price, thank you both very much. Father, first to you, did I simplify that in an unfair way? Were you doing anything violent or anything beyond praying in front of this abortion clinic?
Well, nobody should be criminalized for the thoughts that they're having in their own head. And this is what I was threatened with arrest for. I wasn't actually arrested, but I was interrogated for it and questioned about the thoughts that I was having in my own head, my prayers to God, and then I was charged for doing just this. Now, it's slightly more complicated because, as you say, I did have a sign, but it was saying I was praying for free speech, which I believe is being threatened in the United Kingdom, which it clearly is. And also, perhaps the most absurd charge that was laid against me is that I was also charged for having a bumper sticker on my car which says Unborn Lives Matter, and I parked this within the censorship zone which the local council had established.
It's a shocking story, more shocking than I realized, and thank you for telling it. I want to go to your attorney now and ask, in a Christian country, which it is officially, that invented the concept of free speech and bequeathed it to us and the rest of the English-speaking world, how can speech and Christianity be criminal offenses?
Well, Tucker, unfortunately, this situation has been developing for some time. These offences were originally intended to deal with what they called antisocial behaviour, but gradually they've been expanded over time now to include, as Father Sean outlined, prayer, including even silent prayer. We've had quite a sinister situation where in one video we've seen authorities arresting a gentleman called Adam Smith-Connor. He's an army veteran, asking what he was praying about, and that was whether or not they decided to charge him in that case. So people are waking up, starting to realise really that rights, as you mentioned, that had taken for granted, that have been well established in the history of this country, are being eroded significantly over the last number of years. And it's quite a sinister situation now where we have, even as I speak, the Parliament, you see in the picture behind me, will be debating in the coming weeks whether or not to expand these censorship zones further. And I think your audience may be interested here. We're not talking about a few feet outside the front door of these clinics. These are over 160-yard censorship zones, which means that right around the block and across the street, people are prohibited from praying, prohibited from offering help to women, prohibited even from in any way influencing decisions according to these laws. So it's quite an absurd, as Father Sean said, situation. It's also quite sinister.
Yeah, that's the exact word I was about to tack on to the end of your sentence, but you did it for me. Lorcan Price, Father Sean Goff, a brave man, thank you both for joining us tonight, and I hope that your story makes a change in these attitudes which are authoritarian. Thank you.
Thank you, Tucker.
Thank you.
So there's so much going on, you can just barely keep up with it. The FBI has just raided another university in search of classified documents belonging to the current president. Amazing. An update next. It's easy, ladies and gentlemen. A special counsel is supposedly looking into Joe Biden. They haven't produced anything that we know of, so the Daily Mail has to fill the gap. They just found proof that Biden's brother Jimmy, Fast Jimmy Biden, was hired by a construction company to negotiate with the Saudi government while Joe Biden was vice president, because he's an expert on Middle East construction. We're also learning that the University of Delaware, like the University of Pennsylvania, made a ton of money from, can you guess? Oh yes, China, after Joe Biden opened a fake institute there. The dumbest man in politics as an academic institute. A source tells Fox News that the FBI recently searched the University of Delaware twice for classified documents belonging to Biden. The FBI is still assessing whether there were any classified documents there. Peter Schweitzer is probably the most talented digger into information like this in the United States. He's president of the Government Accountability Institute, and we're really happy to have him join us tonight. Peter, thank you for coming on. What do you make of this? What does it mean?
It's very important. I mean, look, Tucker, if you look at the nexus of these financial ties that the Bidens have with China, you have to go back to the Chinese state, and you also have to go back to Chinese intelligence. Let's keep in mind, Hunter Biden got 3 big deals in China. Some of that money he shared with James Biden. You know, potentially it went to other family members. If you look at all 3 of the businessmen that made those deals happen, those ties are there. The first one was a guy named Che Feng. He helped set up Hunter Biden on that BHR private equity deal that netted Hunter perhaps $20 million based on estimates. When he set Hunter Biden up with that deal, Che Feng was partners with a gentleman named Ma Jian, who was the vice minister for state security in China, with responsible for foreign recruitment. That's from Hong Kong corporate records. The second deal that was set up for Hunter Biden was a guy named Henry Zhao. Henry Zhao transferred $5 million into one of Hunter Biden's accounts. At the time he did that, Henry Zhao was business partners with the daughter of the former Minister of State Security, who ran the entire spy apparatus of China. If you look at Chairman Yi, the CEFC, the energy company, his previous job was working for Chinese military intelligence. So when you're talking about money coming from China to the Bidens, when you're talking about concerns about classified records, when you're concerned about what did the Bidens actually do in return for that money, these are all very serious, legitimate questions that I don't have much confidence at all that the Department of Justice is going to look into.
It just seems so obvious. I mean, these dots really do connect. And again, I have confidence in no one more than you in getting to the bottom of complex money-related stories. But is there any doubt that what looks like was going on was actually going on?
Yeah, I mean, Tucker, you know, you and I both went through the Cold War, at least the 1980s. Imagine if Ronald Reagan's family or Jimmy Carter's family took, you know, tens of millions of dollars from Russian businessmen linked to the KGB. Would there be any question at all that this requires serious investigation? Instead, what we're getting from a lot of people is, well, you can't prove that a crime was being committed. It's an absurd standard that needs to be looked at.
Peter Schweitzer, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.